Unlimited strength starts by pushing limits. Raising the bar, rising to every challenge. At Lockheed Martin, there's no boundary to our ambitions. No barrier we won't break through. Because our strength comes from innovation. And we make sure your strength has no limits.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. If you haven't taken a seat, I urge you to do that. We still have plenty of open seats, although it's getting pretty full. Good afternoon. Welcome to Defense Forum Washington 2025. I'm Ray Spicer, CEO and publisher at the U.S. Naval Institute, and it is great to see such a strong turnout. We have a terrific program lined up for you this afternoon. We'll get right to it, but first I'm going to ask that you please rise and join me in reciting our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks very much. Again, welcome to all our attendees, whether you're here in person or you're streaming online. We're especially grateful for the support of our sponsors, Board of Trustees member Steve Waters, Lockheed Martin, and Radian Forge. So we want to thank Steve for your leadership in standing with the Naval Institute as we address some of the most pressing challenges that our Navy and Marine Corps face today. Thank you to Dan Tenney, Vice President, Strategy and Business Development at Lockheed Martin for Rotary and Mission Systems, Vice Admiral, U.S. Navy retired Joe Rixey, Vice President of Government Affairs, and Lieutenant General, Marine Corps retired Steve Rudder, Vice President for Marine Corps Programs, who are here today. Thank you for your continued support of the Naval Institute and this conference, and glad that a number of folks from Lockheed could be here with us today. And I'd also like to thank Jeff Yeager, founder and CEO of Radiant Forge, who is sponsoring this event for the first time this year. We hope this is the beginning of a long and mutually beneficial relationship with Radiant Forge, so thank you for that. Some quick items for housekeeping before we begin. Our speakers are going to take some questions from the audience. For the attendees here in person, we have QR codes up on the screens on either side here, so please submit your questions using the QR code. If you're online, you can do it via the website. Please do ask questions. Please try to get to the question as quickly as possible. Please don't wait to submit your questions because we're going to take them in the order they come in. So don't wait until the speaker's done to start filing your questions. But your perspectives and your queries help drive the kind of rigorous dialogue that this forum is meant to foster. There is a break at 2:45, but feel free to get up as necessary. If you do exit the room here, do so on that far exit door to my right. All the way to the glass is the only way in and out of here. Today's theme is accelerating U.S. shipbuilding to pace the threat. The challenge is fairly straightforward, but the stakes could not be higher. Our Navy faces an unprecedented convergence of demands. Our fleet is aging. Our shipyards are operating at or beyond capacity. Operations in the Middle East, the Indo-Pacific, the Southcom AOR, and Eastern Europe have created a sustained operational tempo that shows no signs of abating. And we confront a peer competitor in China whose shipbuilding capacity dwarfs our own in volume and speed. For the better part of 2 decades, we've lived with the assumption that the American industrial might could respond when needed. That assumption is being tested as never before. The Navy requires 355 ships to meet global commitments. We currently have far fewer. Achieving that force structure while maintaining an aging fleet, recruiting and retaining the skilled workforce our shipyards desperately need, and modernizing infrastructure that in some cases dates back to the Cold War is the central problem of our strategic moment. But there is reason for optimism. Across this nation, in Mississippi, in Connecticut, in Maine, in California, and beyond, shipbuilders and sailors are working with a sense of urgency this moment demands. Congress understands the imperative. Industry is mobilizing. The President and his national security team recognize the stakes. Today, we brought together the leaders who are shaping this challenge and crafting solutions. Our most senior Navy leadership, members of Congress who champion shipbuilding, and partners, both traditional and new, who understand that innovative solutions must be part of America's maritime industrial strategy. It's now my honor to introduce our first speaker of the day, who was supposed to be the Secretary of the Navy, but we have a late-breaking change, and Mr. Jason Potter will be representing the Secretary, who is performing the duties of Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition. Prior to his appointment, Mr. Potter served as a professional staff member in the U.S. Senate for 10 years on the Appropriations and Armed Services Committees, shaping major legislation and overseeing investments in shipbuilding, R&D, testing, and modernization. He began his career as a surface warfare officer, serving aboard combatants, and later as a civilian on the Navy staff, including as special assistant to the Chief of Naval Operations, Programming Division Section Head, and Force Structure Analyst. So he brings a rare combination of operational experience, acquisition expertise, and legislative depth to his current role. Today, as the ASNRDA, he is the lead steward over one of the largest acquisition portfolios in the federal government, responsible for the research, procurement, and sustainment decisions that determine the Navy's future fleet. So would you please join me in welcoming ASNRDA, Mr. Jason Potter.
All right. Thanks very much, Admiral, for the kind remarks. I think you really framed well the situation. I think you're going to hear a lot of similar themes in my remarks. So that's, I think we're going to have a great conference. It's great to be here with you. As he said, the Secretary of the Navy sends his regrets. He was looking forward to being here, and he's laser focused on shipbuilding and rebuilding our Navy. And I'd say it's a busy and exciting time around the Navy and for shipbuilding. We have 57 ships under construction, including 3 aircraft carriers, 17 submarines. This is historic tonnage for us. Over the past month, we commissioned USS Pierre, LCS 38, accepted delivery of the future USS Massachusetts, SSN 798, Harvey Barnum, DDG 124, Cleveland, LCS 31, TAO 209 will deliver later this month. The future USS Idaho, SSN 799, will also deliver by the end of the month, and that will mark the delivery of 4 Virginia-class submarines in under 2 years. It's a key milestone for us. We still need to improve our construction performance, but there's positive momentum building. So on the budget front, just kind of give you a sit rep, that's kind of where we are in our shipyards with kind of coming events. In the budget front, on September 30th, as many of you know, we concluded the first ever year-long continuing resolution for defense. That was a challenge for the workforce as we worked through some of the intricacies of operating under a CR the entire year. On October 1st, the longest government shutdown in history began, 43 days. We're happy to have our Navy acquisition workforce back on the job and getting paid. The President signed the One Big Beautiful Bill into law on July 4th. With $18 billion for shipbuilding, $5 billion for unmanned vessels, and $5 billion for our maritime industrial base, this is a historic opportunity for the Navy, and we are moving out. In early November, we made our first awards, 2 TAO oilers and 1 ship-to-shore connector, and there have been more since. One Big Beautiful Bill is working for the Navy. We are closely reviewing the FY26 NDAA agreement. We're looking forward to the full year FY26 appropriation and submitting our FY27 budget request. And as we celebrate the 250 years of both our Navy and our nation, we are at a true strategic inflection point, as Admiral Spicer noted. The celebrations over the past few months have honored our Navy's rich heritage, like Samuel Humphreys' clear vision and uncompromising standards for our first 6 frigates. And while there's much to be proud of, this is no time to rest on our laurels. The People's Republic of China Navy is roughly 100 ships, or 1/3 larger than ours, and it's growing. Some still tell themselves that they've seen this movie before. It's another Cold War, if that were only true. Unlike the Soviet Union, China is combining military power with an industrial and commercial maritime might that is fueling a quest for global dominance. Their shipbuilders move at commercial speed for military effect. That combination gives Beijing a strategic advantage the Soviets never had, and it fundamentally changes the competition. History has taught us a simple lesson. Sea power enables supremacy. It underwrites our economy in peace, determines victory in war. And make no mistake, the United States has the best Navy in the world, but it is the fleet of the future that will decide whether we retain maritime superiority. The challenges we face are well known, and they are not created overnight. We are trapped in some bureaucratic processes while warfare moves at digital speed. We have planned capabilities years before we can fund them, found ourselves bound by continuing resolutions that freeze our innovation as our adversaries have accelerated. And for 3 decades, through the Cold War peace dividend and 20 years of land wars, we have allowed our maritime industrial base to hollow out through consolidation and attrition. The result is stark. Over the past 10 years, our shipbuilding budget has doubled, but our fleet has barely grown. Too often, our programs have arrived late and over cost, and meanwhile, the demand for our high-performing fleet has only grown. We see it in the Red Sea, where our destroyers have defeated Houthi attacks day after day, aided by agile combat system updates that now take hours or days instead of weeks or months. We see it in the Indo-Pacific, where the Chinese and Russian navies are undertaking increasingly expansive operations. We see it every time a ship deployment extends to remain on station, conducting military operations longer than planned. This high operational tempo drives maintenance backlogs. These carriers need refueling, the submarines need overhauls, destroyers need modernization, and so on. The industrial base we rely on to sustain and grow the fleet is not where it should be. And most of you in this room, this is not news, but this is the situation that we find ourselves in, and it is not sustainable, and action is required. Fortunately, we have leadership aligned at every level: President Trump, Secretary Hegseth, Secretary Phelan, and Congress. And we are on the road to recovery and entering a new era for naval shipbuilding. The momentum is real, and it's accelerating because President Trump is laser focused on shipbuilding. He signed executive orders on maritime dominance and acquisition reform. He signed the One Big Beautiful Bill, giving Secretary Phelan resources to grow the fleet. And as Secretary Phelan said at the Reagan Forum this past weekend, under this president, we will have more tonnage and combat power under construction than any time in American history. And we are building the Golden Fleet. To do that, we are changing how we build ships. The first major step was a strategic shift away from our class of frigates. That decision has allowed us to pivot to ships we can build faster and still meet the Chief of Naval Operations requirements. The second step came with the selection of the medium landing ship non-developmental LST-100 design, with a strategy of building to print. Separating the design from the construction of a lead ship is a lesson learned to better ensure the shipbuilder and the Navy clearly understand what is required. We have done it on the submarine tender, and we're doing it again on medium landing ship. This weekend, the Secretary of the Navy also announced the Navy has plans for a future frigate. We're applying lessons learned and best practices as we move at speed. We are focused on high confidence U.S. designs built in the U.S., delivered to the U.S. government, and operational use in numbers with known performance, manning, maintenance, spares, and training needs. A minor engineering change package will meet the CNO's latest requirements as part of his need for 73 small surface combatants. As the Secretary of War has directed, we are on a war footing with a focus on speed to delivery. We believe the future frigate can be in the water in 2028. This design approach will enable us to build in multiple yards using a similar build-to-print methodology. We're leveraging the terrific shipbuilding techniques, technologies, and capacity of foreign partners should be explored and encouraged. The end state here is high confidence in our ability to meet the CNO's shipbuilding requirements on cost and on schedule. And this is not just about contracts, it's also about culture. Shaping sound, pragmatic, and innovative shipbuilding strategies is the business of Navy acquisition leaders. This is where we are spending a good amount of our time right now. We need to apply best practices, our lessons learned, and we need to challenge assumptions to set up our programs and program managers to succeed. With the right acquisition strategies, we can solve a lot of problems. With the wrong acquisition strategies, there's little that can be done. We are shifting from compliance and risk avoidance to speed and disciplined risk-taking. We're trying novel approaches appropriate to the program, like a vessel construction manager, to manage the medium landing ship. As the Secretary of War has made clear, we are transforming the defense acquisition system to the warfighting acquisition system. Speed is the priority. And our approach to speeding up Navy shipbuilding has three themes: stabilize, distribute, grow. To hold industry and ourselves accountable, we must have executable schedules. An at best 50% confidence schedule is no longer acceptable. 65% is now the standard. We're resetting risk sharing in contracts. We're incentivizing on-time or early delivery. We're providing industry with stable demand signals so they can finance against them. Requirements end is creeping. I am now on the hook to take change orders to Secretary Phelan at 5 p.m. on Fridays with program managers next to me. This discipline is non-negotiable. We recognize the Navy's role in introducing change to shipbuilding programs has been disruptive as well. Shipbuilding will always be a hard job. We are working to make it a little bit easier through greater government and cost-shared investments in wages, childcare, parking, cutting-edge artificial intelligence, other technologies, and other quality of life improvements. Our shipbuilders deserve it, and we have more work to do. And as an example, yesterday, Secretary Phelan announced the award of the Shipbuilding Operating System, or ShipOS, funded by One Big Beautiful Bill, $448 million, which will be the Navy's digital infrastructure to connect data across shipbuilders, naval shipyards, and suppliers. This investment will enable industry to modernize and adopt artificial intelligence and autonomy technologies to improve schedule performance, increase capacity, reduce cost. This is another way the Navy is working to make it easier to improve outcomes and help our shipbuilders succeed. Distributed shipbuilding is not a buzzword. It is the key to unlocking more shipbuilding capacity across design, build, test, and trials. Focus factories, outsourcing, new yard development together are already providing millions of man-hours of added production capacity each year, and we need millions more. Of the 1 Columbia and 2 Virginia-class submarine, or 1+2 build rate, we need to reach more than 8 million hours, roughly 1/2 of a Virginia-class submarine equivalent of work, built outside of Newport News, an electric boat. That is the magnitude of distributed shipbuilding. We're also encouraged by proactive, industry-led initiatives to distribute workload or otherwise form strategic partnerships to better meet the Navy's needs. And we're looking at distributed shipbuilding in other areas, like how we test and trial and deliver ships faster. At the same time, we are undergoing a structural transformation and acquisition with the creation of the Department of the Navy Rapid Capabilities Office, the elimination of legacy PEOs in favor of portfolio acquisition executives, with our first PAE being robotic and autonomous systems focused on consolidating the development and fielding of the more than 200 autonomous systems the Navy has in development. And I'm happy to talk more about this in the question and answer. The challenges before us are enormous, but if the solution were easy, it would already be done. The work is underway, the system is changing, we are learning, adapting, and getting better. Given the stakes, failure is not an option, and I know we will meet the moment. Thank you very much. Go Navy, beat Army. And I'm happy to take some questions.
Sir, the first question comes from Michael Stewart. He asks, Mr. Potter, what do you feel is the biggest impediment to delivering successful autonomous ships, such as long-endurance ships like MASC and the next generation large USV, to have a true hybrid fleet?
That's a great question. So on the autonomous ships, we have had a history here. This is, in general, there's no new ideas. Everything that comes from someplace. And we've had a good experimentation period kind of over the last 10 years, beginning with Sea Hunter, as far as back as I go, and then the Overlord vessels and so forth. And I think where we are now is really refining the ConOps, and we have what I call 4 legs of the stool for unmanned, and until this point, one of them has been missing. We have the funding, thanks to One Big Beautiful Bill, with $5 billion for unmanned surface and underwater vehicles. We have performers that are eager, with private capital and otherwise, to be in the market. We have requirements from the combatant commanders and the CNO that need to be met, and we have the acquisition tools to do it. So this is the moment, we need to figure it out, and we have, like I said, the first PAE is dedicated to this problem set, and we also have, the Department of the Navy RCO, which really is focused on the combatant commander's highest priority needs, and to the extent those two things overlap. So we're really bringing to bear, from an acquisition organization point of view, a different approach, focused on fielding autonomous systems we have a better understanding of the requirements and what they need to do and how we maintain them. And we have the money to move out. So I'd say stay tuned. We have RFPs out. You've got mask Block 0 and Block 1. There's more to come. We're interested in providing competitive opportunities to this vibrant, competitive market we're in, and task orders that are fairly regular that can be planned for, because now we have a demand signal that's pretty predictable.
Second question, Jeremy Staslicki of SMI asks, there's excess advanced manufacturing capacity in the Great Lakes region, including companies seeing decreased demand signals for ground combat vehicles. What is the Navy's plan to not just maintain Navy shipbuilding in the Great Lakes, but grow the supplier base for platforms from Columbia to unmanned vessels?
Sure. So I think, I'm familiar with some of the Great Lakes companies and kind of the situation you're referring to. There's I know some efforts in the Great Lakes as consortiums and kind of to form teams with some of the larger companies in the region, and then team on proposals back to the government. I know Jeremy, so I'm happy to look into the specifics of what he's working on. But I think, the Navy, we are fortunate to have the Maritime Industrial Base office that is really focused on our suppliers, separate from our primes. And if it's sort of a Maritime Industrial Base need, our MIB is the front door for companies like that are looking, for ways to help, or they see it. They're either a current supplier that's challenged, or they think they can help. That's generally our first stop. So again, I need to get into the particulars to understand what's going on.
Nick Wilson of Inside Defense asks, can you speak more about the Golden Fleet? What capabilities will it consist of, and what are the Navy's first steps to develop this concept?
So I think I said about as much as I'm going to say today. So I think we've got, as Secretary Phelan announced it over the weekend, there's been a, kind of, that is an effort. We are doing it. I'll let him speak. You can read his remarks on how he's characterized it. It is a focus of the president, and it is there's more to it than I've laid out here. And I'd sort of say some of it's going to come with the budget, I expect. Some of it may be before the budget. At this point, though, I've said about as much as I can.
Okay. Patrick Garvey asks, how is the workforce and supply chain responding to the demands you're placing on it?
Sure. So, so I came from Capitol Hill, where I had the luxury of getting briefed, and I had my own spreadsheet, and the work we do as staffers. Didn't fully appreciate the machine that is the acquisition workforce and all that it takes to make, deliver ships, and everything from the ceremonies that are incredible and the people that pull those off. And again, thanks to everybody that helped support this event today and the staff, because these things are not easy to do. And shipbuilding, that definitely left a mark in terms of all the expertise that goes into it. But that's just like the finish line. And as you go back to the starting line, it is incredible, really, as a nation, the capacity and capability we have in our professional workforce. So it's been a tough year. I think the year-long CR is uncertain. The shutdown is not great. There have been other things that have come along where we've had to adapt. It's created huge opportunities. You've seen really innovative solutions and things come out, and we've consolidated and found efficiencies and streamlined, and we're making the best use of the resources we have. And I think this PAE transition we're undertaking, we're eyes wide open to that. But the truth is we do need to hire. We have gone, in my view, to a point where it's time to bring back some different things. And we know kind of functionally where we are in each of our program offices. And there's some that are in need of hiring actions, and that's on me, and we're working that as we speak. But that is definitely there's stress out there, and we're doing our best to work through that.
Next question from Sam Lagrone of USNI News. Can you outline the acquisition plan for the follow-on frigate? Will there be a competition?
I think at this point, I've kind of outlined the key elements in the way the Navy's thinking about it, and that's about as far as I'm going to go. It's rapid fire.
Ellie Gilbert asks, what specific bureaucratic processes appear to be slowing down shipbuilding, as you referenced in your remarks?
Yeah, so, we're working on the FY28 budget right now, and I mean, even if you just start at kind of the POM process in the way the Pentagon works, it's almost too late to input fact of life and other changes that you would like to have in fiscal year 2028, which is 2 years from now. So that alone is difficult in terms of working through the process. And then we have obviously multiple levels of review. There's good oversight. There's everyone is doing their best, but it is just hard to have a 2-year lead time from a need to the funding. And then we have flexibilities. There's ability to reprogram. We do have options and tools available to us. But I think what we're seeing is the world is accelerating faster, exponentially faster. And our tools are kind of like a linear function. And it is just getting harder and harder for us to adjust to real-time needs. And I think that's what the Secretary of War is talking about, and speed and more flexibility, and kind of having a single person accountable for a portfolio that can make more trade-offs through the portfolio as time goes on, as the threat changes, as programs change. We're embracing that, and we recognize the need to have as much of that flexibility as possible, with the right oversight and giving people, the information they need to do their jobs. I think that is a recognition of the acquisition transformation that's underway, is that the status quo is not going to work, and it's not effective against the threats we're facing. The work is on us and the services in particular to redefine, what our organization should look like. And basically, okay, the dog caught the car. You can restructure yourselves. What do you want to do? How are you going to fix it? So, you're going to see, I think, from us, a pretty significant plan as it comes to these PAEs and how we're trying to structurally get ourselves in a better place.
Michael Bozick of OpNav N5 asks, Mr. Secretary, is there a role for foreign partners? This is a preview of the panel discussion coming later today. Mm-hmm. Is there a role for foreign partners to contribute to shipbuilding or maintenance? And if yes, what are your thoughts regarding updating the Jones Act?
Sure. So I think foreign partners are critical, and it's a significant pillar, I think, of this administration and the way we're interacting already with different partners. So you've got significant, we have 3 shipyards right now that are owned by foreign companies with U.S. subsidiaries that do significant work for the U.S. Navy and that are critical to our Navy industrial base. I think, there's more and more interest, more and more meetings, in terms of how to get deeper and wider cooperation with foreign governments and foreign companies. And so I think we're going to look at our RFPs, and I think the best thing we can do really is provide a level playing field with competitive opportunities to maximum extent and allow companies to identify how to partner and work amongst themselves to present us with proposals. And so I think we're going to be open to different arrangements that involve foreign partners and kind of how different companies would look at, teaming to meet our needs. So, and if that takes us to, overseas options, I think we're open to hearing, how people would envision meeting it. But I think it begins with us stating our needs to the extent we can, having a competitive environment, and then having companies propose back to us and us kind of work through the details, because there's obviously lots involved legally, legislatively, regulatory things. But we sort of need that use case, first that would sort of set us down that path. And we owe it to sort of present opportunities that could lend itself to that. So it's a little bit circular, but that's how I'm thinking about it.
Mark Morissette of North Atlantic Capital asks, what is the role of additive manufacturing in shipbuilding? Is it realistic to see additive manufacturing contributing meaningfully to both sustainment and new acquisition?
Sure. So I think it's, our maritime industrial base office, this is a key line of effort for them, is additive manufacturing, both from the ability to scale and build things faster, and also the ability to reverse engineer and build things we don't have the ability to build anymore. And then there's kind of expeditionary and the ability in austere places to have an ability to make parts and do what you need to do. So no doubt a key enabler to what we do and a key piece of the future, particularly we have it's like 60 or 70% of our suppliers for nuclear shipbuilding are sole source, single source, and as we get ourselves into some precarious spots, having second sources, that we can qualify through additive processes or otherwise are super important to us. So I see that piece. I mean, maintenance, again, it's the same idea with repair and spare parts. So yeah, we're after it. I think there's investment there. There's investment in One Big Beautiful Bill for that. And if you've got something to offer, I think talk to the Maritime Industrial Base team.
Mallory Shelburne of USNI News asks, the new national security strategy never mentions sea power or shipbuilding. What do you make of that?
Is it out? Is it out? Okay. What's that? Okay. Yeah, so I'll be honest, I need to review that. I've not done my homework on the National Defense Strategy. It's been in an interim state for a while, and so I will take that for action, but probably above my pay grade to comment.
Trying to find ones that haven't been touched on yet. Chris Barrett of VTG asks, can you comment on any consideration to bringing some of the legacy shipbuilding infrastructure back to life? For example, Avondale and Sparrows Point, to expand and fortify the shipbuilding industrial base, perhaps as centers of post-construction system integration under the distributed shipbuilding concept.
Yeah, I like that thought. Yeah, I think there's certainly opportunity there, and as we've reduced infrastructure over time, the idea that you could reopen it, revitalize it, makes a lot of sense. I think part of this would be, we again state our needs, and then industry proposed to us what they would do, and there are some land deals and other proposals we're considering right now along these lines. And I think I'm not super interested unless the Navy is going to open a new public shipyard or kind of a government-owned, government-operated facility, to look at the Navy being in the middle of a transaction like that. So it'd be what industry team thinks Avondale makes sense to reopen. Bring us, your game plan, and we'd look at it.
Have you looked at the U.S. Navy adopting U.S. Coast Guard ship designs, for example, NSC for a light frigate or the FRC for a new coastal patrol ship?
And so I'd say the Navy and the Coast Guard are very close when it comes to shipbuilding. We have a lot of the same shipyards that we use. We have Navy-type, Navy-owned equipment on Coast Guard vessels. There's supervisor shipbuilding is in the shipyards in some cases where the Coast Guard vessels are also built. So I'd say we're in continuous communication about one thing or another with the Coast Guard, and I'd say it's probably too early to make any declarative statements. It is a promising other government client of ships that we would work closely with. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Marcus Jones of the U.S. Naval Academy asks, is the need for the ASN to personally manage shipbuilding acquisition change orders through SecNav a sign of successful adaptation or is this a sign of severe failure at the acquisition system at the PEO level and below?
Yeah, so I think a little of this is you do what you're told when your boss tells you to do something. And I think this is, a reaction to making sure the government, and he understands like what's out there and basically managing change in ships. And he's not the first SecNav to have this kind of policy. We have a change order policy that has been in place, for decades, that elevates certain changes. We're putting a spotlight on it because we recognize the significance, well, it may not seem like it, that changes can have on the overall program outcomes. And government-directed change or even contractor-requested change and that back and forth, there's a lot that hangs in the balance. And so he wants just a tighter handle on it. He really wants the designs to be completed, this build-to-print idea, where it really is pretty straightforward, where you've got detailed design done, companies are working on their work instructions from the detailed design, and then they need to build the ship. And then we're not changing. Typically there's kind of this best practice of 80% design completion at the start of construction, and then there's still that other 20, and you hope you get the other 20 done before you catch up with that. And so, but we're trying to really take, the medium landing ship 3D product model, incorporate class standard equipment, and be done. Like, we're out, hand it to the VCM. VCM, they have the contractual arrangement with the shipbuilders, and removing ourselves and our ability to change the ship from the process. So I think, part of this is, if we're not setting up our program managers for success, if they have a schedule that's unachievable, the design's not done, then yes, they're gonna need to make changes. If we're setting them up for success and we're doing this right, then no, they should just be overseeing a design that is done and watch it get built. And there's always things that come up, and that's, we're trying to really narrow that scope down. And this is one way, at this point in time to do it. And ideally over time, it's not going to require this level of review. But I would say, even like the Ford had changes, went to Secretary Stackley, if not higher, once they got into the thick of it, as some folks may recall. So, it's important, it's part of our business, and it's something you got to pay attention to.
A Navy Lieutenant Commander asks, given CNO Caudle's acknowledgement that the Navy cannot build to desired fleet levels under current industrial conditions, how is RDA aligning requirements to actual yard capacity, particularly for platforms like submarines where AUKUS demand is already stressing the Virginia-class cadence?
Right, so the devil's in the details here. We have a submarine plan that gets us to the 1+2 rate by 2031. And then we've got, the AUKUS boats, and when that transfer would actually happen within a year or two later, our projections we're at 1+2.33, which is kind of the magic AUKUS number. But even without that, there's a lot going on to not necessarily be totally constrained on the AUKUS and a number. But, we're the MIB investments. There are significant investments that we're working through as we speak, in addition to that. But the MIB investments take a year and a half or so to actually hit and then start showing returns. And then I think ShipOS that we talked about, that is focused on nuclear shipyards and our submarines first and foremost. And we're going to do everything we can to move from the about 1.1, 1.2 Virginias a year up to the 2, and we know what we need to do to get there. But like I said, none of this, we didn't get here overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight. It's not going to come as quickly as we need it to. But there is no shortage of focus from the Secretary of War, the Deputy Secretary of War, the Secretary of the Navy, the White House, on the criticality of submarines to the warfight in our day-to-day operations, as well as the need to get our production rate where it needs to be.
Bo Jardine from Naval Links asks, what measures is the U.S. Navy taking to address the shortage of fleet oilers and the loss of Red Hills Fuel Depot? are new, lower cost, easier to build in U.S. shipyard solutions for fuel movement under consideration?
Right, so we're super happy that I think our first One Big Beautiful Bill award was 2 oilers, and so that was significant in November to get that out. Yeah, the Combat Logistics Force and our oilers are critical. I'd say there's a lot of support in the administration for additional oiler capacity. We haven't really had an opportunity to present a budget request yet, kind of a new one since the 26th. So we know we have more to do there, and we're working on it.
Dominic Cipriano asks, how are current supply chain visibility efforts going to be integrated with the new Ship OS initiative?
Right, so I'm not going to get kind of into the details because I'm certainly not the one that's going to be doing that. But I think we've had a pilot program with Ship OS that started earlier this year at 1 public shipyard, 1 private shipyard, and 7 suppliers. Over that time, we saw material planning and things, drop, from weeks to hours in some cases. And we just see huge opportunity here where they take, their software and their analytic and predictive tools that they use on the battlefield and bring them to bear on our submarine industrial base, where we have lots of data in lots of forms and lots of places, and it's ripe for a company like Palantir to come in and really help us up our game and bring shipbuilding into a digital and kind of integrated way that it hasn't been. And there's going to be, lots of work here with the other companies and other players involved to make this real. But the pilot program was sort of the proof of concept that got us the confidence that this is the right next step.
Hunter Stiers asks for an update on the transferable rearming mechanism at sea for vertical launch system reloading at sea.
Hunter, I will follow up with you. I know that was a big priority of Hunter's, and I just want to make sure I get him the full answer.
Vincent Kindfuller asks, in addition to shipbuilding, there's also severe challenges in ordnance production, torpedoes, missiles, but also sonobuoys and other expendables. What does the Navy intend to do to encourage expansion of the ordnance supply chain?
Sure. So shipbuilding is a major priority of this administration. I would say munitions is, if not a bigger priority, right there. And we are laser focused on our munitions needs, getting them where they need to be. I think you saw in the National Defense Authorization Act that was released, at least a dozen multi-year procurement authorities that the department requested, just to provide stability, the stable demand signal for these critical munitions, that the purchase orders will be there. We need the investment from the companies to help us scale and help themselves scale to be able to meet our demands. And really it should be crystal clear to all of our munitions manufacturers of where the department's at and what we are willing to do to help them.
Okay, last question comes from Christopher Morales at DARPA. As the Navy seeks to expand capacity across both manned and unmanned platforms, how do you envision the shift from relying primarily on Tier 1 shipyards to distributing more work to smaller non-capital vessels to Tier 2 and Tier 3 yards?
Okay, so I think first off, the build-to-print model that we're looking at both for the future frigate, medium landing ship, subtender, we want to keep going there. And that, I think, really is important for the second-tier yards that often don't have a full in-house engineering team that could do a full design kind of from clean sheet. So that's one thing we're going to do to help. Just if you're going to be the prime on a ship, we, the government, and you need kind of be on the same page about where we are with the design and really getting you a complete design. So we're talking about a construction contract, not a design and construction contract, if we can do that. On the outsourcing stuff, I mean, we're seeing it, I'm not going to name names, but it is happening already, and our primes are finding where that capacity is. And if you're a company that's got capacity at a second or third tier shipyard, I would talk to the primes because most of them are eager to listen and eager to work with you because they recognize, the backlogs are real and schedules are challenging, I think, across the board, and relief valves and opportunities to find places where structural work can be done is at a premium right now, from what I can tell. And we, the government, are also working to help match make and incentivize that behavior because, short of really expanding the primes facilities and workforce is another constraint, it's one of the key elements here that I think we're going to have to utilize. All right.
And Mr. Potter, I want to thank you for, on very short notice, agreeing to come speak to this audience and kind of covering what's going on, because there's a lot going on, as you know. So we appreciate it very much. He had very little notice he was going to be doing this, so I just want to thank you again for doing that. As a small token of our appreciation, I present you with Naval Institute Press Book, Naval Power in Action by Brent Sadler. It's a great read. Christmas is coming up. But thank you, sir. Remember I said there's a break at 2:45? We're going to take a break now. So forget the break at 2:45. We're trying to adjust schedules here with speakers. We have a speaker who's coming in a little bit late. So we'll take about 15 minutes now, and then the 2:45 break goes away. So, but again, you can feel free to get up on your own throughout the day and take care of business. Thank you. 15 minutes. speaker is here. So I would ask that you take your seats. So as a reminder, we're using the QR code if you have questions for the next speaker, for all speakers actually. But just a heads up, the QR code is going to go away here shortly. So if you haven't captured it, I encourage you to do it now so you can submit your questions. I'm now honored to introduce the Honorable Dan Sullivan, United States Senator from Alaska, and a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator Sullivan brings a unique strategic perspective, the vantage point of a state whose geography, resources, and location at the nexus of the Arctic and the Indo-Pacific make it central to America's security. He served our nation with distinction as an officer in the Marine Corps Reserve, with multiple periods of active duty service that give him a firsthand understanding of the operational challenges our forces confront. His commitment to service members and veterans continues to guide his work in the Senate. As a member of the Armed Services Committee, Senator Sullivan has been a leading advocate for strengthening American military readiness, rebuilding the defense industrial base, and ensuring the Navy and Marine Corps have the capabilities they require in an era of great power competition. He has also championed deeper cooperation with our allies and partners across the Indo-Pacific, recognizing that regional security depends on collective strength and shared commitment. Please join me in welcoming a man who never misses the opportunity to advocate for more amphibs, Senator Dan Sullivan.
Thank you, Admiral. Okay, thank you, Admiral. And I will say a few things about the amphib issue at the end of my remarks, since I just found out about an issue that came up in the NDAA as we're working through that. But I want to begin by thanking the U.S. Naval Institute. You guys do such a great job. As a member of the Marine Corps for over 30 years, have been an avid reader of Proceedings. Had a few articles published in Proceedings many years ago as a young captain. Great work on a whole host of things that you have done. So I want to begin by just talking a little bit, if you go to the first slide, about some of the action in my neck of the woods. Admiral Spicer mentioned it, but we have a lot of action going on up in the Arctic, the North Pacific. Doesn't always make the news, but we are on the front lines of great power competition. This new era of authoritarian aggression. We're also in the Admiral mentioned it, we're kind of when you think of seams of all the COCOMs, you have literally NORTHCOM there, INDOPACOM, EUCOM, STRATCOM, because of our really critical location in terms of missile defense. And then you go to the next slide. This is the action, right? By the way, this slide's already out of date. Okay, these are the Russian and Chinese incursions into either our ADIZ or our EEZ just in the last 3 years. In the green is the joint Russian-Chinese strategic bomber task forces or joint Russian-Chinese naval task forces into our ADIZ and EEZ. They've not done that anywhere in America except in Alaska. So we are very, very busy. As a matter of fact, like I said, that's out of date. We had an incursion right before Thanksgiving. So I care a lot about our strong naval, Marine Corps capacity, particularly on shipbuilding. As it relates to my state, certainly there is a lot going on, and this barely ever makes the news. So I like to highlight it, particularly when I'm in front of a bunch of folks who actually know what's going on, which is you guys. So let's talk about shipbuilding. We'll go to the next slide. So I would say there's good news right now and bad news, and I'll start with the bad news. This is the bad news, okay? Our adversary, number one adversary, is increasingly overtaking us in a big way in terms of shipbuilding capacity, and is expected to do so even more by 2030. Look at those numbers. We all know the saying, you guys are the experts, but quantity has a quality all its own. That shows it right there. Next slide is even more of a challenge. This is a report I had requested. The Congressional Research Service has some really outstanding, and I mean outstanding, folks who are very focused on shipbuilding. Some of the people at CRS have been doing that kind of work for 30 and 40 years. So they do great work. This was a conclusion. I had asked them, hey, where are we on shipbuilding? They did a big study that I had asked for. That was their conclusion. Okay? That is not good news either. And to add to this crisis, this flashing red light crisis, we've had a lack of focus on this problem for quite some time. I mean, I think it's a bipartisan lack of focus, but I would say the last administration took this last lack of focus on shipbuilding to new heights. Go to the next slide. So about a little bit over a year and a half ago, I wrote an op-ed in the Examiner, and it said, hey, we need to really focus on this issue of shipbuilding, what we just laid out. The challenges, whether it's CRS, the Chinese, and we're not focused on it. I quoted extensively in this op-ed from a hearing about, this is almost a little bit over a year and a half ago, the posture hearing for the Navy and the Marine Corps when they came before the Armed Services Committee, and I showed these numbers to the Secretary of the Navy, and then I talked to him about his focus, not on shipbuilding, but on the, quote, climate crisis. And I have that exchange that I had with the Secretary of the Navy back then, but I will tell you, it was so frustrating to have the senior leadership of the U.S. Navy come to our committee and talk about the climate crisis and never talk about shipbuilding. To talk about in the guidance that came from the senior civilian officials in the Navy and the Marine Corps, the strategic guidance that came out where the Secretary laid out his vision, mentioned climate change 9 times, and never once mentioned addressing the size of the fleet during these dangerous times. So a complete lack of focus on what the Navy is supposed to do, which is build ships and be a lethal fighting force. Some of you may have seen this hearing about a year and a half ago, but I asked the Secretary, I asked the Commandant of the Marine Corps, hey, if you have a young lieutenant who's taken his platoon out for training and one of his Marines loses his rifle, what's going to happen to that lieutenant when he comes back from the training? Commandant looked at me, Senator, that lieutenant will be relieved of duty. Okay? I asked the CNO, Admiral, if you have a Navy ship commander, even if he's in his stateroom sleeping in the middle of the night, they run into another ship in the middle of the night, what's going to happen to that captain of that ship? Senator, that captain is going to be relieved of duty. And then I turned to the Secretary. I said, Mr. Secretary, now I'm quoting, if a Marine platoon commander gets relieved because one of his Marines loses a rifle, and a Navy captain gets relieved because his crew hits another ship while he's asleep in his quarters, should the Secretary of the Navy be relieved or resign for failing his number one mission, shipbuilding, as opposed to climate change? Let's just say the Secretary of the Navy didn't like that question. So, that's the bad news, and it's bad. We're in a deep hole, and our main adversary has been focused on this issue for quite some time. So, what's the good news? Next slide. I think at the strategic level, particularly in this town, you have success on big issues to move big issues if you get 4 kind of major things happening at once. What are those? One is presidential leadership. The second is bipartisan congressional action and involvement. The third is serious funding from the Congress. And the fourth is innovative thinking about issues that have been confronting us for many, many years. So those are the four key things. In my experience here, on what you need to really start to move the needle on important issues like the defense industrial base and shipbuilding. And right now, when it comes to shipbuilding, particularly for the U.S. Navy, I think we have all four. And that is actually really good news. So let me go to each one of these. First, on presidential leadership. You know, after President Trump got elected last November, he met with a number of Republican senators. I was in that meeting, you know, congratulating the president, but talking about his incoming agenda. And one of the things that I had the opportunity to raise with the president-elect at the time, was these slides, right, about how we are way behind on shipbuilding. But I also mentioned to him that in particular with regard to Republican presidents, think about it, Teddy Roosevelt and the Great White Fleet, President Reagan and the 600-ship Navy, that this has been a big area of focus and accomplishment over decades. So I said, Mr. President, this is a great opportunity, and you can be the guy who does it, the way Teddy Roosevelt did, the way Ronald Reagan did. And this could be a huge legacy of the Trump administration. And you've probably seen it, but they're taking it very seriously. The president highlighted this issue as a top priority of his in his State of the Union address. And then they put out on April 9th this really good, and hopefully you've seen it, executive order on restoring America's maritime dominance. If you haven't taken a look at it, I highly recommend you do, because it's good, and it's serious, and it's presidential leadership, which is what we need in this area in particular. By the way, you know, in terms of presidential leadership, it's interesting to go back and look at history and say, hey, how did President X, Y, or Z, FDR also had a very big shipbuilding, working closely with Congress, initiative, even before Pearl Harbor, which was quite successful. So it's good to ask, like, hey, how did you do that? How did we do that? Look at history. Well, I had the opportunity to go directly to the source. Several months ago, I had the opportunity to have lunch with John Lehman, Secretary of the Navy, John Lehman, who was President Reagan's Secretary of the Navy pretty much the whole 8 years of the Reagan administration. By the way, he's 38 years old when he took that job. And I said, Mr. Secretary, how'd you do that? Right? I mean, it's pretty impressive, especially when you think about where we are today as a country. Our economy was probably 2/3 or almost half the size it is today when the Reagan administration undertook their very big shipbuilding initiative. So I said, what was the secret sauce? How'd you do that? Because we're having a hard time building anything right now. And the secretary said, number one thing, Senator, I said to the bureaucracy and industry, no change orders. No change orders. At a certain point, everybody puts down their pencil. That's it. Okay? Now, if we find a great innovation after we've built, 20 or 30 ships, we'll go from block 1 to block 2 to put that innovation in. But we're not going to be doing it every week by a new commission. And he said, sounds pretty simple. He said, trust me, it was really hard to implement, but I would say that was probably the number one thing. No change orders when I said, put the pencil down. So I think those are the kind of things you can look at history at and learn. And so I think we need to incorporate those kind of lessons. Next slide. This is the second area that I was talking about, which is bipartisan legislation that's focused on the issue. Now, I've had legislation for a number of years in the Congress. It's called the Ensign Act. By the way, this little trick in the Senate, you come up with some crazy acronym that sounds cool, and all of a sudden people are really interested in your bill, right? It might not even be a good bill, but this is a good bill. But this is the Expanding Navy Shipbuilding Infrastructure and Growing the Navy Act, the Ensign Act. Who can not like that, right? And I know Mark Kelly's going to be talking about the Ships for America Act. But anyways, the Ensign Act, and a lot of times, you guys know this, a lot of bills with good ideas, you don't normally get, hey, the entire Ensign Act is going to get passed. But what we've done with this, we put this out a couple years ago. In last year's NDAA, we had a number of things from this bill that were in the NDAA. In this year's NDAA, we have a number of things from the Ensign Act that we think are going to help with regard to shipbuilding, particularly this issue, kind of going back to John Lehman, of predictability so people can rely on things. So some of the things that were in last year's NDAA, requiring mature designs prior to contract, allowing industry to plan for CapEx and forecast parts and labor requirements, improving Navy assessments for build of their first ship in a class, requiring the Navy to brief Congress on any proposed reduction in battle force ships, the NAVC issue, which, by the way, was in here. It was in last year's NDAA. Got stripped out, unfortunately, this year's NDAA to give the NAVC commander a little bit more time in that billet, kind of like the head of naval nuclear reactors. Most NAVC billets go about, it's about 2 years, but when in testimony, I've asked the admiral in that position, they always get extended, always get extended. And why not have a longer billet for the guy or the gal who's in charge of shipbuilding? Authorizing funding for shipyards west of the Panama Canal. Believe it or not, we don't have a lot of that right now. And allow for budget line item flexibility in the ship Navy account. So these are the kind of things that are in this bill. I know Senator Kelly's going to be talking about his Ships for America Act, which is kind of focused on the broader marine industrial base. I'm a co-sponsor of that bill. So these are the kind of things that we think are important, that are happening right now in the Congress, which is very bipartisan. Go to the next slide. But let me give another one, and that is money, funding. Our budget reconciliation bill that we passed in July has very, very significant funding for shipbuilding. It's the component of the defense part of that bill, and that money is already appropriated. That's in the bank, ready to go. Was $150 billion. About $34 billion of that was for Navy shipbuilding. And then we had about another $14 billion related to Coast Guard shipbuilding. So that is, doing the math here, that's almost $50 billion just appropriated in since July on shipbuilding for the United States. That is serious money. And that, in my view, is what we need. So the fourth area that I wanted to mention is, as I mentioned, looking at a challenging problem, but coming up with innovative solutions to a problem that our country's faced a number of times. We've had a number of hearings. I'm also on the Commerce Committee on shipbuilding. And what you see is this boom and bust cycle. It really, really is boom and bust over the years, over the decades. After certain wars, it's bust. And then we got to ramp up again. And so we've been staring at this challenge for a long, long time. So what are some of the new innovative approaches as it relates to shipbuilding? Well, one, some of you may have seen, and if you haven't read it, I strongly recommend you do read it. Secretary Hegseth's November 7th speech. I have a copy of it right now. I actually read the whole thing over the weekend. It's all about acquisition reform and undertaking a real hatchet at our very big, problematic, in my view, acquisition process and bureaucracy in the Pentagon. And one of the things that they're talking about in that is a much more innovative approach to provide more competition in commercial-oriented companies with products that you can bring off the shelf, even if it's an 80% solution. Now, of course, that doesn't relate exactly to an aircraft carrier or to a submarine, but you can do a lot more with some of the new defense tech innovations that are happening, even as it relates to shipbuilding. So you may have seen this article today in the Wall Street Journal that said about $500 million from that $50 billion that I was just talking about is going to a very advanced AI-related company, Palantir, that looks at data management, supply chain innovations as it relates to the Navy. That's happening now. I applaud the Secretary of the Navy for thinking along those lines, but these are the kind of innovations we need to bring to this challenge. What's another innovation that I think the time has come for this innovation? You go to the next slide. And that's the issue of working with our allies. The President lays this out in his Maritime Dominance Executive Order, and I think this is something that is going to be really important. You know, when you look at China's capacity, its industrial capacity is enormous. And we don't have the ability to say, hey, like in World War II, Freedom's Forge, I'm sure you've all read that book, we're going to ramp up and be the biggest, baddest industrial country in terms of our ability to produce in the world. We have a very, very big competitor right now in that regard. But if we start doing these kind of industrial projects, including and importantly shipbuilding with our allies, and some of our shipbuilding, partners in the U.S. always get, hey, we're not going to outsource this to the Chinese, to the Koreans and Japanese. But we need to start thinking along those lines, because I'm sure a number of you have been to American shipyards. I'm sure a number of you, like me, have been to Korean and Japanese shipyards. Hey, if you don't think we have something to learn from some of those shipyards, you're not looking hard enough, in my view. So the President mentions this in his executive order, but I think we really need to accelerate the work that we can do on shipbuilding and learning from our allies in terms of helping us rebuild our Navy. It's not just the Navy, however. That's a picture of an event I was at very recently. That is working with our allies, the Canadians in Finland, on developing, designing, and building icebreakers. In the budget reconciliation bill, as I mentioned, there's a lot for the Coast Guard. As a matter of fact, for our Coasties here, I chair the subcommittee in charge of the Coast Guard in the U.S. Senate. We made in that bill, it didn't make a lot of headlines, the biggest investment in the Coast Guard in American history, by far. It's not even close. $25 billion. And that's all capital projects, right? The Coast Guard, I like to say, is kind of like the Marine Corps. They have this culture that in many ways you admire of like, hey, we can suck it up. Hey, we can do more with less. Hey, it's okay if my helicopter is 70 years old, But at a certain point, you can't do more with less, right? You have to do more with more. And the Coast Guard is driving icebreakers that were commissioned in the early 70s, right? By the way, we have 2 icebreakers right now. One is broken. The Russians have 54, many of which are nuclear powered. So this bill says, hey, we're going to start closing that icebreaker gap. This bill the money's in the bank, 16 new icebreakers, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to build them. And by the way, this was I don't want to be up here ripping the Biden administration the whole time. This is a Biden administration idea, this initiative called the Ice Pack with Finland and Canada in us. We learn from the Finns. We build our first 4 ships, icebreakers, in Finnish shipyards, and then bring that technology and investments to the United States to build the rest of these icebreakers. And that's what we're going to do. President Trump, signed off on what the Biden administration did, and you have here a picture just from a couple weeks ago. The Secretary of Homeland Security of course, who's in charge of the Coast Guard for the United States, the ambassador, the Canadian ambassador to the U.S., and the Finland Commerce and Defense Minister. So we're going to be doing that in terms of working with allies. So look, I think these 4 things that I mentioned, presidential leadership, bipartisan legislation from the Congress, who has a strong interest in this, significant funding already, which is in the bank, like I said, close to $50 billion, and being innovative, which is one of our great strengths, of course, as Americans, to get out of the deep hole that we've dug. And I think in that regard, the future and opportunities in shipbuilding are very, very bright. And I'm going to stay very involved in this, both on the Coast Guard side, the Navy side, the Marine Corps side, and yes, Admiral, the amphib side. And I will say, a little bit of a disappointment. Sometimes our friends in the Navy, they got to get out of their own way. We had in the NDAA my provision to very much dramatically cinch down this provision I got in the NDAA a couple years ago on a minimum of 31 amphibs. Navy's always tried to kind of, do the shell game and say, we got 31, they got one they call the, I think it's the USS Tortuga. It's been in dry dock since 2011. They count that as one of their amphibs. So we had some language to tighten that. The House had even stronger language, even stronger than my language. And somehow I just am reading through the NDAA and all of those provisions are gone. So I'm a little pissed because the Navy kind of one-upped the Congress on amphibs, but I've just begun to fight on that issue. So with that, thank you again. I appreciate all the interest here and look forward, Admiral, to any questions or comments or thoughts or suggestions or criticisms. Keep up the good work. U.S. Naval Institute, you are a treasure that we need more than ever in our country. Thanks a lot.
Senator Sullivan, I just want to thank you I know your time's precious. I know you're very busy over there in the Hill. I want to thank you for your service to our nation, both wearing the uniform and on the Hill. And as a small token of our appreciation, I'm presenting you with Naval Power in Action by Brent Sadler, which you can get at your Naval Institute Press. Just
Great.
a reminder.
I look forward to reading it.
Yeah, thanks again, sir.
Okay,
Really
thank you,
appreciate it.
Admiral. Okay, good. Thank you.
I'm now honored to introduce the Honorable Mark Kelly, United States Senator from Arizona. Senator Kelly brings a perspective that few in Congress can claim. He's lived and breathed the intersection of cutting-edge technology, national security, and human excellence under the highest pressure imaginable. Before coming to the Senate, Senator Kelly was a NASA astronaut and a naval aviator, go Navy, who flew the A-6E Intruder. He has commanded combat missions, piloted some of the most advanced aircraft ever built, and represented America on the International Space Station. In the Senate, he has been a strong voice for defense innovation and understands that industrial capacity is a national security issue. Senator Kelly serves on the Armed Services Committee and has been deeply engaged in the debates over military modernization, naval strategy, and the resources required to maintain American advantage in an increasingly contested world. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senator Mark Kelly.
Well, thank you for the introduction, Admiral Spicer, and thank you to the U.S. Naval Institute for the opportunity to join you all today. It's great seeing everybody. And I'm honored to join so many leaders from the Navy, from the Marine Corps, Coast Guard, from industry, from academia, and from Congress who are united by a common focus. And that is building, maintaining, and deploying the fleet that our national security requires. The conversations taking place in this forum directly shape how quickly we can adapt our national maritime enterprise to the demands of the decade ahead. The theme of this conference, could not be more timely. Accelerating U.S. shipbuilding to pace the threat. Accelerating U.S. shipbuilding requires that we revitalize the full spectrum of the United States ocean-going maritime industry, both military and commercial. While this theme is usually discussed in the context of naval combatants, the reality is this: without a strong commercial maritime base, the United States cannot deter conflict. It cannot build the necessary industrial base. It cannot surge in crisis, and it cannot sustain the economy during disruption. And look, you may be asking, what is a senator from Arizona, a landlocked desert state, doing at a shipbuilding event? Well, I'll say this. Arizona may be landlocked, but after one summer there, you'll understand why we dream more about water than ship captains. But seriously, the U.S. maritime services and the maritime industry are incredibly important to me. My paternal grandfather served in the Pacific Ocean in the U.S. Navy during World War II. My mom's dad served in the Atlantic, also during World War II, on a Liberty ship in the Merchant Marine. My great-grandfather was also in the Navy. My dad was in the Army. Don't hold that against him. But before I became a senator, I commanded the space shuttle. I flew in the Navy. I was a midshipman at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. I graduated in 1986 with my third mate's license and my third assistant engineer's license. And while at the Merchant Marine Academy, I served on merchant vessels crossing the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Indian Oceans, where as a teenager and in my early 20s, I was handed quite a bit of responsibility. And so, as the first United States Senator to graduate from the Merchant Marine Academy, I understand how critical the U.S. Merchant Marine is, how critical the maritime services and the maritime industry is to our national and our economic security. With oceans to the east and the west, America has always been a maritime nation. So we need a strong Navy, and we need a robust Merchant Marine. Our civilian mariners and commercial shipyards play roles that are absolutely essential. More than 80% of goods imported into this country come by sea, making the maritime domain critical to the economic well-being of Americans, whether they live on the coast or not. And just as importantly, maritime transportation logistics are critical to national security. Domestic shipbuilding ensures that key maritime infrastructure isn't controlled by our strategic competitors. In a prolonged conflict, especially one overseas, the U.S. and our allies require a strong Navy and will rely on the U.S. Merchant Marine to provide the sea lift capability we need to support overseas operations. But of course, as all of you know, the U.S. flag is nearly non-existent in international maritime commerce today. Of the more than 50,000 ocean-going vessels sailing the seas today supporting global trade and commerce, only 80 are U.S. flagged. Almost none of those vessels were built in the United States, and the United States increasingly relies on foreign-built, foreign-flagged, foreign-crewed commercial ships to move critical goods, including the materials and equipment that we will need in any kind of military contingency. And despite the decline in size of our maritime industry, we're still facing a shortage of mariners needed to crew these vessels, and a shortage as well of welders and pipe fitters and naval architects, marine engineers, electricians, and all the folks we need to build ships. There's a shortage. And that puts us in a very vulnerable position. Because while the United States Merchant Marine has retreated, our near-peer adversary, China, has been on the march. They've gone in the opposite direction. Today, more than 5,500 ocean-going vessels operate under the Chinese flag. Remember how many we have? 80. Chinese shipyards hold 62% of the global order book of merchant vessels set to be built over the next decade, providing it with economic leverage, industrial capacity, and the ability to militarize commercial vessels if needed. They put military requirements on their commercial ships. And Chinese entities have invested hundreds of millions of dollars around the world in strategic ports and technologies which enable global commerce. This is not just an industrial challenge for us. It is a strategic vulnerability. Now, to be clear, I do not believe that the United States should want to be in any kind of conflict with China. But I do believe that the best way to avoid conflict is for the Chinese to understand, like truly understand, that if they got in a conflict with us, they will lose. Unfortunately, in the maritime domain, whether it's strategic sea lift for the U.S. military or the opportunity to leverage control of maritime supply chains for economic coercion, the United States needs to be doing more. Addressing all of these challenges requires us to comprehensively rethink our maritime strategy. That's why in April of this year, Senator Todd Young from Indiana and Representative John Garamendi and Representative Trent Kelly and I reintroduced the Ships for America Act, the most comprehensive maritime industrial-based legislation in 50 years. Today, I want to focus on the concrete steps Congress is taking, particularly through the bipartisan, bicameral Ships for America Act, which will modernize shipyards, stabilize production, strengthen the maritime workforce, and reinforce the supply chains needed to close the delta between fleet requirements and industrial output. And all of this will help our military industrial shipbuilding as well. There's synergy there. Many of the challenges that we're facing in military shipbuilding would be alleviated with a stronger commercial maritime industry. As the saying goes, a rising tide lifts all boats. The solution to these challenges is not simply to ask our shipyards to do more. That hasn't worked. The solution is to give them the resources, the tools, and the legislative framework needed to succeed consistently, efficiently, and at scale. At a very high level, the Ships for America Act does 5 different things. First, it provides national oversight for maritime issues in this country by requiring the president to name a maritime national security advisor, and creating a maritime security board to develop and implement a national maritime strategy across the entire federal government. The bill also provides consistent support for the maritime industry by creating a maritime security trust fund, which captures the taxes and the fees that are already paid by the maritime industry, and then reinvests those fees back into industry support programs. This will ensure long-term future funding to support these efforts. Second, the Ships for America Act works to make U.S.-flagged vessels cost competitive in international commerce. Our bill creates new incentives for commercial shippers to consider moving cargo aboard U.S. vessels. It creates new investment tax credits to offset the cost of bringing new vessels into the U.S. flagged fleet. It reforms and streamlines outdated Coast Guard regulations to make it easier to flag in the U.S. registry. And most importantly, the bill establishes a new program called the Strategic Commercial Fleet, which would bring 250 new U.S. flagged vessels into the fleet over the next 10 years. Critically, this program ramps up over time, allowing the industry to grow to meet demand. Additionally, recognizing that the U.S. Transportation Command has identified an imminent need for additional tanker vessels, the program includes specific language specifying that MARAD should prioritize adding tanker vessels through this program if Transcom determines more tankers are needed than are available through the tanker security fleet. The third thing the Ships for America Act would do is revive American shipbuilding and the ship repair industry. It creates new tax incentives for shipyards, streamlines federal regulations for shipyard operations, and incentivizes U.S. shipyards to modernize to be able to compete against the most advanced shipyards in the world. Fourth, the Ships for America Act encourages shipbuilding innovation. It creates opportunities for the Navy and the Coast Guard to assess and integrate commercial best practices where they make sense. It establishes and funds a National Maritime Innovation Incubator Program to advance and accelerate R&D for technologies and manufacturing processes which will support the maritime industrial base. Lastly, our bill makes historic investments in workforce development for the maritime industry. It creates a national recruiting campaign. It invests in training facilities at our maritime academies. It provides incentives for mariners to stay in the industry and modernizes the mariner credentialing system in this country. This one really bugs me because my 2 licenses are expired. And the pilot license I got after I got my wings in the Navy that I got in 1987, still good today. No renewal required. But not only does our legislation address a critical vulnerability to our national defense, but it also counters Chinese influence in the global economy while reinvesting in our economy by bringing more jobs and manufacturing back to the United States. So passing the Ships for America Act will mean more ships built in America, more ships staffed by American crews, and more products coming to our country on American ships. This is going to be good for our economy and our national security. It will create good-paying American jobs, make our supply chains more resilient, lower costs, and strengthen our ability to resupply our military at times of war. Now, my colleagues and I, we continue to work hard to get our legislation signed into law. And I know that what we're doing is an enormous undertaking. And, maybe it's just because I'm an optimist, but I do believe we can get this done. I've, been an optimist for most of my career. For 15 years of my career, I was the guy who had to climb into the rocket ship with millions of pounds of solid and liquid fuel, and this rocket ship was built by the lowest bidder. Hey, we are a maritime nation, but we're going to have to work together on this. Industry, government, the military, Congress, to accelerate U.S. shipbuilding and meet this moment with the seriousness that this demands. This is, in my opinion, a national security crisis for us. Not just the merchant marine and U.S. commercial shipbuilding, but naval shipbuilding as well. And I don't think we can fix the former without fixing the latter. We got to address both, and this legislation helps do that. So thank you. I look forward to working alongside all of you. Thank you very much. Hey, how are you?
Got time for a couple of questions here. First off, from Denise Krepp, former Maritime Administration Chief Counsel. She asks, sir, what are the benefits of the Jones Act in this century, and how does that law support U.S. national security now, and is there a time for a amending it, appealing it, repealing it? How's the Jones Act,
Well-
and maybe how does it interact with your SHIPS Act?
It does not. I mean, right now, we need Jones Act ships if we wind up in a crisis. So this industry does not address, that part of the overall picture, because if we wind up in a crisis with China right now, I mean, you guys know how this works, right? On day one of a war, day one of a conflict, we pretty much have what we need to get combat power across a 5,000-mile ocean. But what does that look like after a few months, or after 6 months or a year? That's when this gets really tricky. So, and that's where we would rely on Jones Act ships if needed. What we want out of this is to revitalize the industrial base, to make sure that there are more manufacturers to make valves and pumps and piping, and have those electricians and pipe fitters and shipbuilders all available for this industry to not only build the merchant ships, but build, Navy ships. Currently, somebody probably in here said this week, right? I mean, we build 1.4 Virginia-class submarines a year, and it's not enough. I think that if we get this legislation passed, we are on a much better trajectory.
Sir Michael Menno asks, the bill seems to be lost in committee since May. Has progress been made by the Senate and House committees, and when do you see it being passed?
It is not lost in committee anymore. We had a hearing on commerce. Some things, sometimes things get passed in the House and they go to the Senate, and what happens. But we had a committee hearing. Need to have one in the House as well, and we need to just move this process along. My wife served in the House of Representatives for 5 years. She used to tell me that the Republicans were the opposition. She was a Democrat, but the enemy is the Senate. But not this time.
Sir, a question from Mallory Shelburne of USNI News. The new national security strategy does not mention shipbuilding or sea power at all. The only mention of the Navy is in reference to controlling sea lanes to stop migration in the Western Hemisphere. How concerned are you about a national security strategy that doesn't seem to respond to China's military ambitions, aggressive actions, and maritime claims in the Indo-Pacific?
I'm incredibly concerned. I mean, I read the document. It seems to miss the moment that we are currently in with the rise of China and their military capacity and how fast it's growing, and the number of missiles they're building, and weapon systems, fighter aircraft, ships, submarines. We have advantages in many areas today. Our submarine force being one. Kind of hard for me to say as a naval aviator. We need a lot more submarines, and we have an overmatch capability now. But what is that going to be like 5 years from now? Any conflict with China, we're going to have to penetrate an A2AD bubble that is formidable. It's formidable today. We need new technology to do that. This national security strategy doesn't seem to recognize that. It is a huge departure from what we have seen from prior presidents, even from this president. So I'm still trying to digest the whole thing and figure out how does the Department of Defense react to this, and how does this inform next year's defense budget. But I have serious concerns.
Sir, Lieutenant Commander Jim Halsell asks, AUKUS will require increased U.S. submarine output at a time when the national security strategy emphasizes economic cooperation over confrontation. How should Congress sustain the industrial investment needed for deterrence without undermining broader economic objectives?
Well, I agree. We do not want confrontation, especially with countries that have nuclear weapons, but really with anybody. We need a strong military to deter conflict. I think AUKUS is a valuable partnership. Just today, I don't know if there's any Australian military. I see some uniforms that don't look exactly like ours. So, Australian or British. It's been a great partnership. We have Australian officers enlisted on U.S. Navy Virginia-class submarines already, training. And we're going to be building these submarines in Australia at some point, and that benefits all of us.
Sir Tim Oliver asks, how do we get parents aware of the opportunity for good-paying technical jobs and training programs and jobs at sea for their children?
So in this legislation, which is pretty comprehensive, 340 pages, there is a piece of this that addresses that exact issue. We got to go out to places like Iowa and Nebraska and go to kids who have never seen an ocean and explain why the maritime industry is a great paying career with huge benefits. I went to the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, graduated in 1986. Today, there was just an article written, like the best return on, well, first of all, it's free, so obviously it's a really good return. But for any school, it's now the highest paying job after you graduate. It exceeds what people make coming out of Harvard or Yale or Princeton. So it's a great opportunity, and in the legislation there is essentially a marketing program for the maritime industry.
Sir Pete Gautier asks, does the Navy need a second budget reconciliation bill to maintain and accelerate shipbuilding plans?
Well, you know, budget reconciliation is a partisan process that both sides employ for certain reasons, right? Under the Biden administration, the Inflation Reduction Act. This administration, the president's main legislative priority, his big, beautiful bill. The defense budget has always been very bipartisan. And I think at this point, this would be a mistake because we are just becoming more polarized and partisan, and Congress is becoming less effective and less relevant. And it would not be a positive thing to start doing the defense budget in a purely partisan way. So the answer to that is no.
To that point, given contested appropriations cycles, how should Congress balance near-term procurement needs against, this is the last question, sorry.
Yeah.
How should Congress balance near-term procurement needs against domestic priorities without destabilizing the predictable demand signal that shipyards require to expand?
Well, I think we got to do both. I mean, we've got some real needs now. We've got depleted magazines. You know, we've shared, you know, a lot of, you know, missile systems, artillery, you know, with the Ukrainians. We've got to rebuild those stocks, but at the same time, we've got to, you know, look towards what capabilities are we going to need in the future, and that's, you know, R&D and innovation. So I think there's got to be a lot of balance there, and we're faced with, we don't have an unlimited amount of money to do this. Our defense budget is the highest it's ever been when you add what was added. We spend $500 billion on, $1 trillion on, possibly, and not get the outcome that we're trying to get from it. The physics on this stuff is really, really hard. You know, rendezvousing, you know, one spacecraft with another, which is a missile system. I mean, I've done this multiple times. It's really challenging, and it's really challenging to do it in a half a revolution around the planet. Really, really hard. You know, we have interceptors up at Fort Greely and at Vandenberg. You know, that's to tackle an issue that's, you know, 1 or 2 ICBMs from a rogue nation like North Korea. But to try to build a system that's going to protect us from the Russians or the Chinese, I am not confident that this is even possible, even if we threw $500 billion at it. And what could that $500 billion be used for, right? More submarines, you know, an advanced fighter, you know, NGAD and CCA, and revitalizing our, you know, ground-based leg of our strategic missile systems, you know, Sentinel, replacing Minuteman. I mean, we have a lot of needs out there, and throwing this new thing in there is just one example of something I can think of off the top of my head, which it doesn't make a ton of sense to put our resources there. We need to put it in other places. So.
Well, Senator, thank you so much for your time and your insights. As a small token of our appreciation, we have a Naval Institute Press book, Naval Power in Action by Brent Sadler. Sir, thank you.
Thank you very
again
much.
so much.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. We will now take a 10-minute break. So please be back in your seats at just after 3 o'clock, please. this end.
You might tell the people that.
There's a lot of seats that are looking for people to sit in them over here. If you could please migrate your way back to your seats. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We now turn to what is in many ways the culmination of our day. One housekeeping note, we now have standing mics in the aisle for audience questions. Please use the mics for the remainder of the conference, and please do ask a concise question if you're at the mic so that others will also have a chance, and we'll give our speakers the opportunity to answer as many questions as possible. Over the past several months, the Naval Institute has hosted a series of conversations, each building on the last, each exploring a different facet of a single urgent challenge. How can the United States Navy maintain superiority in an era of intensifying great power competition while dealing with the constraints of industrial capacity that has atrophied over decades? Over the course of this series, we have examined how we arrived at this moment, the role unmanned systems can play in supplementing traditional platforms, and how non-traditional defense firms and tech startups can help ease the burden on the legacy shipbuilders. Today we explore another outside-the-box solution to revitalizing American sea power. We will explore the opportunities, challenges, and implications of forging shipbuilding and repair ventures with allies and partners. This is not about offloading American responsibility. It is about recognizing that in an era where shipbuilding timelines stretch across years, where threats emerge across months, we cannot rely solely on American yards to deliver the surge capacity we need. It is about recognizing that our friends and allies have shipbuilding expertise, capacity, and incentive to strengthen the free world's naval industrial base. Here to moderate this critical conversation is Dr. Cynthia Cook. She is the Senior Fellow in the Defense and Security Department at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Dr. Cook is a leading expert on defense industrial base policy, military readiness, and the operational and strategic implications of our acquisition system. She has spent her career studying and writing about the intersection of industrial capacity and military strategy, bringing both analytical rigor and deep policy experience to these debates. Before joining CSIS, Dr. Cook worked at RAND Corporation, where she led studies on defense production and military capabilities. She's advised policymakers across multiple administrations, briefing Department of Defense leadership on some of the most complex questions facing our defense establishment. She has navigated the nuances of allied cooperation, the complexities of technology transfer and intellectual property, and she will help us explore not just the opportunities that lie before us, but the genuine obstacles, regulatory, technological, and political, that must be overcome to realize those opportunities. Dr. Cook, the panel's yours.
Thank you for that terrific introduction. I'd like to meet that person. Thanks for sticking through this next panel, which I think is going to be a really interesting and engaging one, because we have three terrific panelists who, through our conversation, are going to help us go a little bit deeper in the questions of how to really enhance the shipbuilding enterprise with focusing on allied cooperation. So we have three panelists. I'm first going to introduce them. Then I'm going to give them each an opportunity for about 2 minutes of opening remarks. Then we'll head to some questions, but we're definitely going to open up some time at the end for audience questions. So come up, start thinking about that. So let me first introduce Mr. William Toti. Bill joined the administration this April as a senior advisor to the Deputy Secretary of War, Steve Feinberg, where he oversees Navy programs and serves as director of the Department of War's Business Operators for National Defense Program. He's a graduate of the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis and served for 26 years in the Navy in the undersea service as a submariner. After retiring in 2006, Bill served in positions of increasing responsibility in the defense industry, culminating in a term as CEO of Spartan Corporation before retiring in 2022. So thank you for joining our panel. And in alphabetical order, both by last name and by company, I will introduce our two industry panelists. First up at the end, we have Mr. Michael Coulter, who serves as Chairman, President, and CEO of Hanwha Defense USA, and is also an Executive Director of Hanwha Aerospace. Michael previously served as President and Global CEO of Hanwha Aerospace, where he led the global defense businesses of Hanwha Aerospace, Hanwha Systems, and Hanwha Ocean. Prior to joining Hanwha, Michael held key leadership roles in the defense industry and the U.S. Departments of Defense and State, and he is a U.S. Navy Reserve officer. Our final member of the panel is Mr. Glenn Kim, who serves as Director of Naval Affairs and Strategy Development, representing HD Hyundai in Washington, D.C. Glenn has been leading the company's efforts to explore various ways to support the United States Navy and to help revitalize United States shipbuilding and the maritime industrial base since 2023. He's been in the shipbuilding industry for about 15 years with a broad range of experiences in procurement and in sales for overseas naval programs. So welcome, gentlemen. I will first turn the mic over to Bill, who can give us the Pentagon's view of where we are and where we want to go in this venture.
Thank you, Dr. Cook. Well, I spoke at this event, I think it was 2 years ago. At that time, I was a free agent, which meant I was able to be a little bit more provocative. I'm now a government employee, so prudence dictates. I stick to the script, but it's a script that I wrote, if that helps. All right. So if you watched the Reagan Defense Forum talks over the weekend, you might have heard OMB Director Russ Vought say that our shipbuilding industry is broken in many ways. Incredible statement, isn't it? Broken in many ways. And, you know, he could not be more correct. As most of the people in this room know, it took a long time to get this way. After the Cold War ended, we declared, you know, we didn't need this Navy that we had been building throughout the Reagan years. You know, so we engaged ourselves in unilateral disarmament, right? And that took a while. We decommissioned ships, like my submarine, halfway through their operational lives. We just won our first battle in the ship's history, Navy unit commendation, and as our reward, we got to decommission halfway through its operational life. And multiply that times dozens. At the same time, we put the shipbuilding industry on life support. We, the government, did that. I can now say we, the government. So during the 20-year war on terror, things, of course, for the shipbuilding industry just got worse. When Admiral Mike Mullen was CNO, he was once asked what he worried the most about. And he said, the Army. CNO. Now, I'm a survivor of the Pentagon attack on 9/11. I can understand why he said that. But during that 20 years, the global war on terror, shipbuilding industry just continued to degrade. That's a problem. And the 20 years did reinforce the notion that our Navy was about yesterday's wars, not tomorrow's wars. Okay, that's kind of how we got here. And fast forward to today, and we've woken up. We understand that this is a serious problem. Folks have come to believe that our current problems in shipbuilding are defects. But when every ship is delivered late and over budget, you can't call that a defect. That's a feature. Okay? I like to say that every system is perfectly designed to deliver the outcome it delivers. And let me say that again. Every system is perfectly designed to deliver the outcome it delivers. If our ships are late 100% of the time and over budget 100% of the time, we designed it that way. It's not a defect. Okay? So how do we fix that? We got to do a lot of different things, right? Our shipbuilding industry has become, and much of our defense industry for that matter, has become, and I'm saying this as an industry guy for the last 19 years, is spoon-fed. Now, what does that mean? As an industry guy, I was told, do what we, the government, tell you to do, when we tell you to do it, how we tell you to do it, and of course, when we pay you to do that, do it. Companies that operate like that for 20, 30 years forget how to compete. So that's one of our problems, okay? We've got more problems, but while we were doing this, our industry partners weren't. They weren't neglecting their shipbuilding industry. They weren't spoon-feeding their shipbuilders. They weren't wrestling control of things that the government shouldn't control. And so, and more to the point, as has been stated several times today, China wasn't doing that. China took those 20 plus years and kept building its industry, and that resulted in this. Okay? 232 times greater than that of the United States. Now, we can roll up in a ball and say it's too hard to fix it, but we can do something about it. And the second point I want to make is if we add our industry partnership building capability, that number changes, right? That ratio changes. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Dr. Cook.
Thank you very much. Michael?
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Let me just build upon what Bill said with a couple of comments and why I firmly believe that allies and partners are central to us solving the problems that Bill eloquently talked about. From a Hanwha perspective, Korea perspective, it may be useful just to understand it. For Hanwha, leading aerospace and defense company in Korea, we'll talk a lot about shipbuilding today, but similar capacity resides in ammunition, artillery. Most proliferated howitzer in Europe right now is actually the K9 howitzer out of Korea. Why is that? It's because Korea has been, in the environment that Bill just described here in the US, Korea has been on a war footing for the last 70 years. They've had to invest in ways that we simply haven't in the United States. Build upon that, similar to the United States, actually there's a declining workforce in Korea and Japan for that matter. So they have had to invest in automation in a way that we have not had to invest. So we'll talk about shipbuilding, but the same thing goes for our artillery, for our munitions. If you go to our factories, largely automated, largely robotic, still a lot of blue-collar labor, but more people holding iPads operating robots than there are actual people holding welding irons. When it comes to shipbuilding, an important point to understand is that we talk about competition with China and the United States. In Korea, we're competing with China every single day in the commercial shipbuilding world. The shipbuilding commercially, largely China, Japan, Korea, and it's a knife fight in the commercial space for who can be most efficient. In Korea and in Japan, companies have had to invest again in automation to compete with heavily subsidized dual-use Chinese shipyards. The only way to keep up with that is to automate. So when I've been bringing guests over, Admiral Fogo a couple weeks ago, to see everybody, you see one guy holding an iPad operating 13 robot welders. So the technology and innovation is there. And then I would add, there's also a culture in Korea which is very focused on delivery on schedule. You lock in a requirement at first, and you don't slip. In Korea, in our shipyard, that is certainly the culture. If something is slipping, you don't decide that it's going to slip. You decide how you're going to fix it. So there's a cultural piece to it. Cynthia, I need one more. From a Hanwha specific perspective, the reason there's an American who until recently was a global CEO and now the US CEO. Hanwha, about a year and a half ago, took a view to evolving from being the leading aerospace and defense company in Korea to being a global company, and by do that by becoming multi-domestic. So in Australia, we're building howitzers and infantry fighting vehicles. In Europe, we're building munitions factories and plans for more. We'll be announcing some things in the Middle East. So from a Hanwha perspective, slightly different than some of our other Korean partners who we do work closely with in many areas. The commitment of the United States is a global strategy, which is becoming a global company with multi-domestic footprint. In the United States, on the shipbuilding side, so far that has been Philadelphia Shipyard. Many of you are aware that we acquired Philly about a year ago now. We spent the last year sprinting as hard as we can in a number of different facets. Philly Shipyard is a fraction of the footprint that it used to be, so there's a large effort working cooperatively with the state, the local, the Navy from the Navy side on how we can expand the footprint in Philly. In parallel to that, we're sprinting full speed ahead on bringing that automation and technology and process from Korea to Philly Shipyard, leverage all of that investment that has happened in Korea, bring it to make a difference to U.S. shipbuilding today. And then finally, and maybe the thing that we're most proud about at Hanwha, is growing a trained workforce, a huge problem in shipbuilding. In the 12 months we've had the company, we've gone from 900 shipbuilders to 2,200 shipbuilders in Philadelphia. Really, really excited about that. And exchange programs where we're bringing master shipbuilders from Korea to the United States. We're bringing our U.S. Philadelphia workforce to Korea to train not only on culture for delivery on time, but also on all the automation that is that. We can talk workforce some more later, but thank you for the introduction.
Thank you. And finally, Glenn.
Yep. So maybe I can start with some of the HD Hyundai's perspective on the allied shipbuilding corporations and then what we are trying to do here to help the U.S. maritime industrial base. So over the last few years that HD Hyundai made it a top priority to invest in the U.S. market and support the U.S. Navy. So we aim to find ways to improve the near-term operational readiness in the Indo-Pacific region, while at the same time helping strengthen the U.S. maritime industrial base in close cooperation with the U.S. partners. So during this time, HD Hyundai has actively engaged with the U.S. maritime stakeholders across government, industry, and even in academia to develop the concepts, some creative ideas and proposals in an effort to support the United States' commitment to revitalizing its shipbuilding capacity. And this kind of engagement also gives us back invaluable insights that the areas where the allied industry can meaningfully contribute. And especially the President Trump's willingness to working with the Korean shipbuilders has injected a significant amount of energy and also has injected an optimism. And we have witnessed during this time as the United States advances meaningful efforts to rebuild the maritime industrial base and deepen the cooperation with its trusted allies. And HD Hyundai also strongly believes that this shipbuilding cooperation will provide a historic opportunity to strengthen the US-RK relationship, not only industrially, but in a way that fortifies our economies and enhances our shared national security. We view this partnership as a strategic investment in a more resilient and secure future for both nations. To that end, we are working very hard to build a foundation which is centered on the meaningful cooperation in manufacturing. And this is the core of MASCA initiative, in which HD Hyundai is also proud to be participate. And we look forward to MASCA process moving forward and creating a framework that enables a long-term, reliable, and mutually beneficial cooperation. At the same time as MASCA advances, HD Hyundai is doing what we can do at this right moment through the partnership. And these partnerships reflects HD Hyundai's commitment to strengthen the local maritime ecosystems, supporting the U.S. workforce and contributing directly to the American industry capacity. The bottom line is that we are here to support, we are here to share, and we are here to collaborate in a way that grows the American economy, build the U.S. industrial capacity and workforce, and enhance our mutual national security. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for those terrific opening remarks. I want to turn to the questions now, and my first question is for Bill. We heard two great bipartisan discussions of the need for shipbuilding and shipbuilding investment from Senator Sullivan and Senator Kelly. And I wanted to hear, going beyond that and beyond your interesting opening statement, if you had anything you wanted to add to help set the stage from your perspective inside, you're in the room where it happens, inside the Pentagon, inside the U.S. defense establishment. What is the conversation about why is now the right moment? What are the strategic outcomes? And is this part of an effort that connects with what Michael said about getting the industrial base on a war footing or a wartime footing?
That is the mantra, that we are on a wartime footing. So, and that's being beaten every day, not just into the folks in government, but into industry as well at the CEO level. So let me start by saying, I am not a political appointee, okay? Am I clear about that? I don't have a political bone in my body. However, from the inside, the perspective is borderline frightening. The problems have been, I would say, should have been well understood for years as to what's contributing, not just to the shipbuilding decline and the shipbuilding problems, but to where we are in munitions, right? Our munitions inventories were intentionally maintained at a level that might work in peacetime, but would not work in a time of war. So you ask yourself, if people knew about these problems and didn't do anything to fix them, did they not know, or did they not care? I don't know the answer to that question. What I do know is that we do know, and this administration does care. Let me make several points in that regard. Every day we come in, the first thing we talk about is the wartime footing, okay? We're gonna fix this, we're gonna fix it now. That goes from Secretary Hegseth to my boss. The Deputy Secretary of War never had a senior advisor for maritime systems before, right? Executive order signed out by the president, it was talked about earlier, and that flowed downhill. Shipbuilding is a cross-government concern. OMB, National Security Council, I have conversations with these folks almost every day. The Office of the Vice President, Commerce, Homeland Security, and as I said, not just the Navy, Department of Navy, but the Secretary of War and the Deputy Secretary of War. We talk about this every day. We've got a two-pronged approach. One is to fix our internal industry, and the second one is to look at international opportunities. To fix internal industry, that's what the bond program is all about. Business Operators for National Defense. You might remember that in World War II, we didn't start building ships in 1941 after Pearl Harbor. We started in 1938. We didn't own all the components we needed to own to build those ships. We went to our international partners and procured many of the components that we started building in 1938. If we hadn't done that, those ships would not have been delivered until long after the war was over. Well, we're starting to do that now, okay? And so internally, we've scoured industry for senior experts in manufacturing, supply chain management, and every discipline you could want. And we're talking about first-rate companies. Ford, General Motors, Apple, SpaceX. And we look for executives that have retired, late career, and we call them up and we say, how'd you like to serve your country? This is incredible. This has never been done before. I don't think since World War II.
Not since World War II,
Yeah,
exactly.
Since World War II. And the reaction has been astounding. So the bottom line is we are at an inflection point, I think, in this country's history. We have people who care, they're energized to do something about it, and we're moving forward both internally to fix the industry and externally. We're talking about not just building logistic ships with our international partners like the Icebreaker, the Ice Pack program. The issue of building warships overseas is not off the table. We have a backlog of 16 destroyers right now. And we ought to build everything we can, anywhere we can, to burn that backlog down. That's my opinion. And I think for the first time in this country's history, we may be willing to do it.
Okay. Well, you are setting a very effective and somewhat scary demand signal. So let's hear from industry on how they're receiving that demand signal and how they're reacting. And this time I'm going to start with Glenn and then go to Michael. So here's the question. So we know that Hanwha has expanded its global defense partnerships, including with the purchase of the Philadelphia shipyard. And Hyundai Heavy Industries, Glenn, has also dipped into cooperation with an MOU at Huntington Ingalls Industries. So with that in mind, my question to you both is, where are the opportunities for U.S. allied collaboration in ship construction, maintenance, or sustainment that could strengthen shared maritime industrial base capability and capacity? How can you help the U.S. scale up shipbuilding? And let's start with Glenn.
Yeah, so our goal is to enter the U.S. market and help to develop a strong U.S. industrial base. This means that we are bringing new shipbuilding technology and our industry know-how and also new investment. So let me start with the partnership that we are having, focusing on the naval shipbuilding capacity and the innovate for the future generation of the naval vessels. So on the sidelines of the APEC summit that we announced a stepping forward agreement with Huntington Ingalls to collaborate on distributed shipbuilding and pursue the teaming on auxiliary ships. And also we are also very working closely with Andrew on a design for a future unmanned surface vessel, leveraging our HD Hyundai's shipbuilding expertise and autonomous navigation technology, along with the Anduril's mission autonomous technology. Mm-hmm. The second one is the tech side. So we'll be bringing a new shipbuilding technology into the U.S. and also the industrial know-how, which will transform the shipyard operation, improve productivity, and make the jobs more efficient and safe. In that regard, that HD Hyundai is heavily investing in the R&D sector to advance the shipbuilding technology, and we are also working very closely with the Palantir to work on the project that we are calling the Future of Shipyard, which will be more modernize the shipyard operation. Last but not least, investment side. So the Maritime Fund that we recently launched with one of our long-standing U.S. partner is a good example of how we can mix the American capital with Korean shipbuilding expertise to provide technical assistance in identifying the strategic investment opportunities that will bolster the shipbuilding ecosystem. This Maritime Fund will serve as a platform to ensure that the industrial base of the U.S. is efficient and capable of meeting today's maritime needs. And this maritime fund will cover the full spectrum of MIB, from infrastructure to supply chain and to technology, which will lead to some sort of American-owned shipyard utilizing the Korean industrial know-how.
So, Michael, following on to that, you have similar big picture goals, and you've actually purchased a shipyard. So can you talk about the opportunities from your perspective?
Yeah, so from a Hanwha perspective, a couple points. I want to come back on what Glenn and what Bill said too, but we've talked a little bit about Philly Shipyard and what we've done there. Very ambitious plans to get from 1 to 20 ships, but the bigger picture commitment that has been conveyed from our leadership to U.S. leadership is that we would like to recreate the capacity that we have in Korea in the United States. And for point of reference, we do 50 ships a year at our shipyard in Korea. So Philly, we view Philly as a start to that. We're all in on Philly and all around Philly, but it is the beginning of more. So Glenn brought up the good point on partnerships. So we have been having conversations with everybody from Huntington Ingalls about building blocks and modules, to General Dynamics about building blocks and modules, to we've made investments in Austal and have expressed an intent in transferring technology and process into their shipyard, both here in the United States, but also in Australia to meet AUKUS requirements. More broadly, we do believe that what the customer is asking for is a broader base of customers. So we've reached out and talked with partners. We've announced investment in partnership with Havoc on helping them take their sort of startup culture and unmanned surface vessel and bringing Hanwha's credibility in scaling production to the unmanned surface vessel. We've done the same with UUVs with Vatten. So we're looking for ways to increase capacity, both through our own shipyards, but through partnerships. I might just add on this point, I want to come back on what Bill said on doing things in Korea. We view becoming American as very serious, and we're all in on becoming American. But we need to get more efficient in Korea if we're going to continue to compete with the Chinese on commercial shipbuilding. So I think there's people here from Google, and we've had a lot of you guys in our shipyard in Korea trying to help us find out how we can become even more efficient in Korea. So we're looking for true technology partnerships with American companies where we can make Philly more efficient in 5 years than we are today in Korea, and make Korea more efficient than we already are. And then the last point I do want to come back, Bill, because you mentioned building warships in Korea, and I just feel like I need to say, as an industry company, we will respond to what the government says and how the government wants to acquire. What I wanted to point to is we're very proud that we signed the first LNG tanker contract for Philly Shipyard earlier this year, the first one in 50 years in the United States. That is not going to be all done or even largely done in Philly Shipyard. The idea of what we're trying to do is to create the capacity in the United States, right? So that build, that multi-ship build, is going to, on the first ship, largely be in Korea, but done through Philly, with people from Philly participating in that as we bring technology to Korea. And then ship 2 will be more done in Philly. And the idea is that by the time we get to the end, we're actually can do LNG ships in the United States, which we're really excited to do. So as we think about if it's auxiliaries or oilers or whatever, I would encourage people to think not about building outside of the United States, but how do we use that as a tool for creating capacity in the United States, bringing technology to the United States, training the workforce overseas to learn from the people who are doing it now to train your workforce in the United States. So.
Mike, I agree with that completely. I think the president set a precedent with the ICE Pact model, where the first few ships will be built in Finland. We train American workforce and prepare the shipyard in the United States to transition manufacturing to that shipyard in the United States. That model works for a whole bunch of things, and I think that will be the model going forward.
Yeah. So what I like about that model, and I was at Hyundai and Hanwha in Busan this summer. What I like about that model is what I saw there is once again, learning and relearning that the way you get better at production is by producing things. The way you get more efficient is high volume productions. We're never going to be producing one warship a week, so how do we take lessons from high volume production to bring that to the U.S. maritime industrial base? So taking improvements, robotics, other types of system management. I think there's a real opportunity there to draw on that skills and expertise to help build up the U.S. industrial base. That said, the last question was sort of a good news story. What are the strategic opportunities and why it's so important? And what are the companies doing to respond? But we all know from seeing this over and over again in our careers that cooperation is hard, collaboration is hard. There's a variety of regulatory, technological, and political barriers to effective cooperation, not just in the shipbuilding industry, but across the defense production ecosystem. So for this endeavor in particular, can you share where you see what the biggest barriers are, including the legal challenges and the regulatory challenges about building warships abroad? What are these barriers, but what are solutions to them, and how can they be effectively implemented? And I'm going to throw that open to whoever wants to speak first, and then maybe we can get a little discussion going about the barriers and how to overcome them.
I'll jump in.
Thank you.
So the regulatory barriers, again, I said we're at an inflection point. This is a unique point in American history since World War II. I'll keep saying that. Congress is fully aligned with the objectives I just described. Okay, so if there are regulatory barriers, there is a path to resolving them. There are some design issues, I would say, though, as well. If our allied partners want to get in the business of building American ships, American warships, or logistic ships, it's incumbent upon you guys to understand some of our requirements that maybe don't align with some of the foreign requirements. Some of them are, these requirements were developed in blood, right? Like redundant fire mains and things like that. Some of them are legitimate. Some of them probably can be disposed of. But you ought to at least understand them before you start pitching. Because we need every shipyard we can contributing to solving this problem.
I'm happy to jump in on that, Bill. So a couple of comments. One, we couldn't appreciate more the political support that we've gotten. We've had to set up a separate tour office at our shipyard in Korea because of all the attention and focus, which is a great thing. But we are taking a leap of faith. I mean, our companies are investing, our companies are transitioning technology, but because of that political commitment, I mean, Secretary Phelan last week said the Navy's focused on becoming a better buyer, that he's hosting every Friday, I think at 1,700 meetings. If you have a change order, it's got to go to him, right? So there are things that we are reading that show the commitment from the political side, and we do appreciate that. I take the point, Bill, on us learning our way through this. We bid for we're the first company to bid and win an MRO contract for a USNS ship last year in Korea. A little bit of that was about getting business. Frankly, it's not very high margin business. It was mostly about learning each other. How does our team in Korea do MRO on ships? We're now on our third ship, U.S. Navy ship in our yard in Korea now. Feedback has been very, very positive on the work that our team in Korea has done on that. But most importantly, we're starting to work our way through what are the security challenges, what are the process challenges, what are the regulatory challenges, so that as we expand, we can do more. So a couple of comments, Cynthia.
Okay,
Yep.
Glenn, you want to?
Yep. So I can just quickly touch on what Bill and Michael pointed out, that that we also have been able to witness a tremendous shift in political will over the last few years, especially in this administration and in Congress, and there is more openness to work closely with the allied shipbuilding industry. And I would say that there is no greater example than President Trump's willingness to use his waiver authority to allow some foreign construction to fast-track the U.S. construction for the icebreaker programs. And I will stop there. Yep.
So I know that that message, that political will is necessary to overcome these barriers, and we're seeing some of that now. It is really refreshing. Michael, you mentioned the goal of doing more maintenance abroad. Bill, I'm wondering if you talk about how the U.S. is thinking about industrial partnerships with a variety of Pacific allies. We have the Partnership for Indo-Pacific Industrial Resilience, or PIPER. We have the Regional Sustainment Framework, or RSF. How do those align with this shipbuilding enterprise, the ship maintenance enterprise?
It's going to have to continue to expand. In an area of contested logistics, right, or contested logistics in combat, we're going to have to repair ships, reload in as many overseas locations as possible. And it just goes without saying, we can't exfil 5,000 miles to do these things. Again, lessons we learned in World War II, where we built logistics bases out of abandoned, islands all over the Pacific. We're going to have to do that again. We're getting a jump start on that. We're going back to places that we haven't been since I was a junior officer. Hallelujah, right? But we're going to have to expand and continue to develop that capability, not just in the standard, but in some non-standard regions as well.
Okay, that is a very good thought on how we need to grow our cooperation, not just in shipbuilding, but across the enterprise, because along with shipbuilding, cooperation is a skill itself. So this will contribute to that. Now I'm going to ask one last question. I do want to leave some room for audience participation here. And it is, if we were to look 5 years out, what would success look like for a joint U.S. allied shipbuilding and repair venture? And more importantly, what are the practical steps that we need to be taking right now in terms of policy, in terms of industry, in terms of operations, to get there in 5 years, so that in 5 years we're not looking back and saying, God, why didn't we do more? Why didn't we do more? What can we do now to make this a success? How do we inspire the enterprise to go forward?
I can take a first shot at that, Cynthia. Sure. So I answer that in my different hats, right? I mean, as an American, I'm hoping that these partnerships can help solve a really critical problem for our country and for our Navy. From an industry perspective, I would like to see deeper integration of U.S. industry and partners around the world who bring unique expertise. I mean, we talked about icebreakers, where the designs on icebreakers are great. I personally believe, and the reason I'm at Hanwha, is that the ability to scale may be unique to a couple of countries in Korea and Japan who are competing with China. So I think that if we can leverage those industrial partnerships, and then from a Hanwha perspective, our ambition is clear. As I've mentioned before, we aspire to be a global aerospace and defense company, and in part of that being an American defense company with a large industrial footprint in the United States. That is a constructive part of shipbuilding to the U.S. And one point I guess I haven't made yet, it's probably worth pulling the string on, is one of the reasons that Korean shipyards are so competitive is that the shipyards are both commercial and military, right? And we heard Jason earlier today, Secretary Potter earlier today, talk about some of the ups and downs. But when you have a strong commercial base, when you have an up and down of a shipbuilding program, you sort of weather that, and you don't go through the challenges of the workforce issues that we continue to have in the United States. So if I could sort of wave a crystal ball, it would be a demand signal both on the naval side and on the commercial side that I think would get us where we need to be.
Okay.
Yep. So when HD Honda has continuously expressed our strong interest in improving the U.S. shipyard operations and growing the U.S. industry capacity. So for example, that we are expanding the shipyard capacity with our partner like Huntington Ingalls. And then in that perspective, in 5 years, we would like to say that we have begun to build some new classes of the ships in the United States shipyard for the United States Navy, leveraging our technology and expertise. But we, as Bill and Michael pointed out earlier, that we need to think about the ways that how we can then fill the gaps, which is urgently necessary to the warfighters in the theater. So in order to bring that new capabilities to the theater as soon as possible, we would like to have the first few ships in these programs to be built in Korea and ready to be operational. And then while we are transferring the shipbuilding technology into the US, and then the capacity is reached in the US.
So
And- yep.
sorry.
No, and then to get there, I mean, we need continued support from the United States government, and then we also need strong U.S. Industry partners who can work together on these kind of challenges.
So investing in partnerships, but also both of you mentioned the demand signal very directly from Michael and Glenn. You talked about how we can fill the gaps, so identifying and filling the gaps. So we're not going to get anywhere in 5 years unless industry sees the demand signal today. So, Bill, giving you the last word on that before we go to audience questions, and I think we're going to be, I see people lining up already, so.
And I'll get real specific. It is up to the government to produce that demand signal, guys. My specific answer to your question is in 5 years, I'd want to see modules and supermodules being built all over the country, including the Alabama shipyard, so that the shipbuilders can focus on doing only those things that only the shipbuilders can do. So that's step one. I'd like to see 2 new shipyards working on Navy ships in the United States. I'd like one of those to be on the West Coast. I'd like to see the Philadelphia shipyard fully engaged in manufacturing ships for the United States Navy. I'd like to see 3 Navy ships under construction overseas training American workers so that they can bring that talent back to the United States in these 2 new shipyards. Is that specific enough?
Love the vision.
All right, good.
All right. So we'll turn to audience questions now. Please state your name, where you're from, and an extremely brief question so that we can get as many people as engaged as possible.
Hi. My name's Denise Krepp. I'm the former Maritime Administration Chief Counsel, and I'm up here because Mr. Toti said a second ago he didn't know what was going on 20 years ago. I was in the room 16 years ago. We knew there were problems. We knew that there was a mariner shortage. We knew there was a sea lift problem. But I'll be very blunt. You have a situation I didn't have. You have support from the president. I was too busy defending off EPA, AID, Ag, State, and Energy. I'm surprised I'm even here because they tried to stab me in the back so many times. So knowing that I survived that lovely experience and knowing that you want to build, I'm thinking Mare Island, what are you doing to neutralize the individuals who tried to, detonate me when I tried to promote the maritime industry?
So how do we overcome the political
my
antibodies?
My job isn't to do what the Navy does. My job is to help break down those obstacles you just described through the interagency process. My job is to make the Navy successful by making sure that we remove those barriers. So that's one thing. And we have the political will to knock those barriers down, and that makes it a whole lot easier.
Just going to end by saying thank you for cleaning up our mess, and we created it, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, on the left here.
Hi, thank you. I'm Michael Koziel from the Sydney Morning Herald newspaper in Australia. I have a question about AUKUS, unsurprisingly. We've just had the President commit to that and also the Pentagon hand down its review. I'm wondering, can you give us a sense of what issues and concerns that review raises, particularly with regard to what we're talking about today, shipbuilding. And given what you said about the dire state of affairs, can you level with us and say what the real chances are of the US producing enough nuclear-powered submarines in just 6 years to be able to spare some for Australia?
Thank you for the question. I had HMAS Rankin in my squadron when I was Commodore. I rode Otway and Onslow when I was in like a lieutenant junior grade. I love the Australian Navy, and so I want to the great submariners, and although you would say submariners. So the challenge is indeed the shipbuilding capacity, right? I think that's the only obstacle. Can we get our submarine shipbuilding capacity up to the rate where we can afford to give up? Because we need every submarine we can get. Okay. That's a political decision way above my pay grade. My job is to help get that shipbuilding capacity up to the rate where we can indeed transfer submarines to Australia. I fully support that initiative.
Okay.
Just a real quick follow-up. I mean, we keep getting told there are a lot of AUKUS enthusiasts in Congress who say it's happening, like the rate is going up. Is it?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Could I just 10 seconds? I mean, from a Hanwha perspective, this was the principle of our investment in Austal, which is now 10%. We expect government approval in the coming week to go to 20%. But the principle is we would like to help both Austal in the United States and Austal in Australia in capacity, and anything that we can be doing from an Australian perspective to leverage technology from countries that are building at scale is a helpful thing.
Thank you.
Okay. Glenn, did you want to add on, or okay?
Hey, great panel, guys. Super. Craig Hooper here. Bill, quick question. Any other World War II authorities that you're out dusting off and getting ready to deploy on us? And Mike, you mentioned it. You own 10% of Austal. You're going for 20. You're going to go for more? What's the plan there? Talk us through some of that.
You go first, Mike.
I will say, so we invested 10%. We did that to align our interests with those of Austal, the customers, and the shareholders. We received U.S. government approval to go, actually the U.S. government approved us to go to 100% in the fastest, CFIUS approval ever, I think. It was weeks. The Australian government's been working their way through that. We appreciate that they're working their way through that. The Treasurer yesterday said he expects it to happen next week, a decision, so we're excited about that. At that point, we will go back to Austal and have a conversation. But we have continued to talk with them. I mean, we talk with Austal very regularly. We've had conversations with Austal about doing work in Philly Shipyard to help with their capacity problems. In the meantime, my team in Korea was hosting the technology guys from Mobile, from Austal Yard 2 weeks ago to do that. So we're really excited. We think that we can be additive both in the US and Australia, and we'll come through that.
Okay. So I'm going to take a question from online to reward the people who are out there watching us. And I'm going to actually pull in 2 questions. I'm going to turn to Glenn first. So this has to do with sort of more technical issues. Like, what do you see as the opportunities and challenges for modular construction? How, what are any lessons learned you'd like to share that are particularly pertinent to the U.S.? And that comes from a question from Steve Moretto with Goodman Tech. And then Andrew Bonica asks, how can shipbuilders use AI? So thinking about different technology solutions to the shipbuilding problem. One is, we talked a little bit about modular construction, but if you have anything to expand on it. And then really bringing in these sort of emerging technologies, these advancing technologies like artificial intelligence. How is that impacting your work, and what benefits can you use to bring better practices to the U.S. shipbuilding enterprise?
Okay, so let me answer to the first question. So if we are going to have like a modular construction, then as you all know that there is kind of a regulatory challenges for doing that, but I believe that there is a strong political will to cooperate with the allied shipbuilding industries. I guess we will see the real progress for that as we are moving forward. And to answer to the second question, let me just take some examples. So our HD Hyundai shipyard in Ulsan, Korea is using, which is called the HiCams, and that is the AI-based monitoring system, which means that we are connecting kind of AI-based software into the physical CCTVs, and then it can just monitor the entire shipyard, and then you can detect some kind of emergency or any kind of symptoms that maybe the accidents can happen in the shipyard. It can detect them, and then it can just give us the immediate alarm to that. And that kind of technology will make the shipbuilding industry safer. And then, and the other technology that maybe I can take as an example is that we are using some sort of like tools that we can put it on our list. And it is kind of a real-time communication device between the work site and the engineering department, which means that if there is some kind of engineering issues that the workers cannot do, then they can just they can do the real-time communication with the engineers, and then they can get the immediate solution for that, which means that will dramatically improve the productivity without wasting time going back and forth to the office. And all those kind of technologies can bring kind of more advanced shipbuilding operation capabilities.
Thank you. Do you want to?
Glenn did a great job with that. A couple of points that I would make, I guess, are we're very proud of our smart yard technology in Korea and transferring it to the United States. One of the things as we talk about Navy and sort of security issues is if we're building Philly, which we are, to be multi-use, continue to do commercial, but also naval, some of those are going to be less exciting to the Navy as you talk. I mean, we're monitoring where everybody is, in Korea we use UAVs to monitor where pieces are moving and all that. And you can imagine the Navy might have some concerns with some of those. But thinking from a regulatory standpoint, as we bring that technology from multi-use yards overseas into the United States, how you do that from a regulatory standpoint and a Navy standpoint is one question we don't have. And then just to foot stomp the point earlier, while we're very proud of the technology we have, we are interested in getting more efficient back in Korea. So, I was with Mike Gallagher at Palantir last week trying to figure out if there's something that they can be doing to help us get more efficient back there too. So I think there's a technology transfer process that actually can work both ways.
Thank you. So I see a number of people in the room who would like to ask questions. There's about 10 more questions online. But in the interest of keeping us on track, I would like to hear from each of you, what one key takeaway would you like this audience to go home with in terms of what we discussed on the panel today? Bill, let's start with you.
We need everybody pulling together, our allies, our partners, non-traditional industry inside the United States. We need to engage every touch point we can to solve this problem, or it's not going to get solved in our lifetime.
Okay. Glenn?
Oh, yeah, we are truly honored to be part of this conversation, and then we look forward to work closely with U.S. leaders and industry partners and our Korean counterparts to turn this moment of opportunity into lasting capabilities for our two nations. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Michael?
It's hard to up on either of those. Han was all in, and we're excited to be part of this conversation as well. Thank you for having us.
My takeaway is I've been in this sector for over 25 years, and I haven't ever heard as much energy and interest, and I'm really excited about the way forward. So thank you all for your part of that.
Thanks. Thank you.
So thanks, Dr. Cook. Great job moderating. Great panel, and always a sign of a good panel is we got more questions in the queue than we have time to answer. So thank you all for participating in this panel. Okay, the last speaker of the day. I brought you the money guy. We're very fortunate to bring you a speaker who can share insight on how the Navy is funded and equipped to meet the challenges of today and tomorrow. Vice Admiral Brad Skillman, Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Integration of Capabilities and Resources, or the N8. Admiral Skillman's distinguished career in the Navy spans nearly 4 decades. A surface warfare officer, he commanded USS New Orleans, USS Ponce, USS San Antonio. He commanded Amphibious Squadron 4 for his major command. As a flag officer, his tours include Deputy Commander and Chief of Staff, NATO Joint Warfare Center, Stavanger, Norway, Commander Expeditionary Strike Group 2, Director of Programming Division, OPNAV N80, and now as the mighty N8. He's also my new personal hero because when we needed a speaker on very short notice, he just stepped right up. So I appreciate that, Admiral. So please welcome Vice Admiral Brad Skillman.
Thanks, Ray. Appreciate it. Oh, here we go. I think I'm on. So thanks, Ray, the USNI team for inviting me. I want to ask, has it been a good day? Why has it been a good day? Hello, my friend. I think what you've heard is a large sense of urgency and commitment. Second Phelan came into office about 9 months ago, and he was hired for his job specifically to make U.S. shipbuilding great again. And he is laser focused. So over that 9 months, he has collected information, asked a lot of questions, and he is a shrewd man, a shrewd businessman, and he rakes me over the coals pretty much all the time. And I will leave here, and at 5:15, I will be talking to him, and I hope you're a nicer audience than I think my second half will be when we talk about the budget. But what that meant was that he went and he took a fix on where we were. And you talked about that today, right? Very clear of where we are and where we need to go. And so then it was up to him and his team to say, how do we move out? And so he has a plan. And about 100 days ago or so, CNO 34, Admiral Daryl Caudle, became our new CNO. And they are literally arm in arm. So now they have a voyage plan of where we're going, and they're charting the course. And we're going to go there, and we're going to go there rapidly. While I'm speaking to you, my SecNav is on the Hill talking to Congressmen about PB 26. I think everybody's aware of what occurred this last year, a very unique year with reconciliation on top of our normal base appropriated funds, and trying to understand what that does within the government, and then saying, oh, and we would like to move faster. Could you give us some more money? Because the SecNav would like to double the ships in the fit-up, and he wants to start right now. And so he's over talking to people, and I think he will be successful. So I think that there is there is bipartisan support on the Hill for a larger Navy, a more capable Navy. There's bipartisan support for the defense of this nation. Specifically in the two major focuses that we have in the NSS and what will be the NDS, because they can now sign it because the NSS was signed this past week, is Homeland Defense and deter and defeat China as necessary, right? Deter always, defeat if you have to, and you only do that through strength. So the President's peace through strength is actually applicable. Inside the Navy, we're signing right now the naval warfighting concept. The Joint Staff has the Joint Warfighting Concept. Ours nests underneath. It's the Navy's contribution for that. It is not a text replace of Joint for Navy. It is actually a well-written document that describes how we do our business and what we will do. I will align my program based on the naval warfighting concept. That's how I will build program in the future, which is great. Secondarily, Admiral Caudle wants to do something that I think is unique and actually necessary, and I think most of our job, is the Navy deterrence concept. So, and that's not just strategic deterrence, which we do day in and day out. And if you know Admiral Caudle's background, right, he was NavStrat, he's a career submariner. I mean, he drinks reactor coolant for breakfast. I mean, he is into it. It's not about that. It's about the entire gamut. It's conventional deterrence. It's how do we use all of DIME to be able to coexist in a world that we live in today and the world we live in into the future. Within that, I do want to say something exciting. I know Jason Potter talked to you this morning. So he talked a little bit about Golden Fleet. the SecNav is talking a lot about it in the last week. So you're hearing about Constellation cancellation, you're hearing about a new frigate, you're hearing about additional sea lift platforms, additional tankers that are going to be bought, hospital ships, small and medium USVs that will build a large influx of uplift into the surface ship industrial base to be able to accomplish that. Lots of pressure and lots of motion in a coordinated plan. There's more to it. I think that if the SecNav, his quote is stay tuned, there's more to it than that. But over the next few weeks, I think it's going to be illuminated to everybody of where we're going. And this is the chart, we've charted the course and we're going to move down it. So he's working all the traps on the Hill. He's working the traps at OSW and OMB to be able to achieve that. He has incredible top cover from the highest level of our government right now, which is great. And so it's really a good time where the stars are aligning for what you all talked about today, where we go to this inflection point, as Bill talked about, and we turn the corner. This is the opportunity. Can we do it? I think we can do it. One of the reasons I think we can do it is we're opening up from being as stovepiped and as bureaucratic as we've been in the shipbuilding industry over the last almost 40 years. So in the late 80s, when we reduced the subsidies for to build commercial ships in our shipyards, obviously, and relied totally on military platforms, that changes how the industry moves and what they look at to be able to accomplish. So at this point, we're in a position that we build a handful of exquisite, the finest warships in the world. But we do so at very large costs. Over the last 20 years, I've doubled the shipbuilding account, dollar for dollar. I remember in 2010 saying, I don't understand why I only have $15 billion in my shipbuilding account and I have $19 billion in my aviation account for procurement. Well, I'm at $34 billion right now, but I'm not building a lot more ships. I'm pretty much treading water based on my buying power that I have. And that's based on what we have done to the industry writ large. And COVID did no one help in anything that we do, all from commodities through the supply chain, all the way up to the end user and the end builder, which is our premier yards in the United States. So this is that time that we can really move out and do really well and make a difference here, and I'm excited about that. I work really hard to pitch it, right, to the corporate boards that we have to deal with. So I've talked to my boss, the SecNav, and it was a big learning experience for him coming from business, going into the bureaucracy, which is the United States government, specifically in the Office of the Secretary of War, and going, well, hey boss, you're my first corporate board. I have to get my program through you. Then I have to get it through OSW. Then I have to get it through OMB. And finally, I have to convince Congress this is a good thing to buy. Oh, by the way, they all love defense. All of those. They all have different opinions and different priorities all the way up. So what he is doing right now, and understanding that, he's lived it long enough to see the landscape, right, that he's having to deal with. So how do you align that, right? Well, then it's really helpful to have the guy that's at the very top saying, I want you all to align. So as we push forward, that's a good place to be. I'm excited. The panel I was really glad I got to see some of it, Ray, because I was really excited that Bill was on the panel with Michael and Glenn on this, because that's a critical component of the change in mindset that we have in the United States right now versus how we've always done business. We've always said, well, we do it the best. We don't need help from anybody else in the world. What we're saying now is allies and partners at all levels, commercially, also when we actually go to fight, they're critical components. So why don't we leverage them to the utmost degree? So this is that attempt to break down those barriers that we have internally. And Bill is right. There is bipartisan support to move in this direction, right? To improve us, to get better, to grow rapidly, and to be able to do that deterrence and defeat if we're called to do so. I do want to go into a couple things and kind of footstop where CNO's Caudle's going. And you're going to hear him talk a lot in the next few months. And we go to SNA. SNA is going to revolve around Golden Fleet. It's going to revolve around making shipbuilding great again. We are working diligently to have a talking narrative for that for everyone, so that we can pitch that properly and make sure all of our partners in uniform and in industry understand where we're going and why we're going there and how fast we have to go there, the urgency that the SecNav is really placing on us, which is really great to see. But bottom line for Admiral Cottle, he says the first thing we have to take care of is our sailor, right? And the sailor will make everything happen, right? A battle-ready sailor is his #1 priority. Put out what he's calling C notes, right? So kind of harken back to Z notes from Admiral Zumwalt to say, these are my priorities. I want to tell everybody what it is and move out. And those sailors, what's important to understand is that's essentially a cradle to grave. Their competency, their training, their quality of service, which is quality of life and quality of work, all of those things put together. You can see all the bills racking up for me, right, as we're moving through that. All together, but the quality of the training is something that we're really focused on, because if you went out, retirees, Navy retirees in the crowd, a handful, you go out on a ship today and you're like, oh my goodness. The tech that we have right now is amazing, and what we require our young sailors to be able to do is really, it makes you feel great that you have that smart of people in the United States and can go out and do it. But train them to that level to be able to fix their own gear. Bill talked a little bit about a lot about contested logistics when you're in the INDOPACOM theater. That means you need to be able to fix your own kit. So we're going to continue to press for things like right to repair with Congress, right, to be able to get that so we can fix our own kit when we're deployed, and it's really difficult to bring an OEM out. But those things all together, you have to have better and better sailors to do that. CNO is really focused on it. But his foundry, fleet, and fight kind of foundation of what he's building the Navy on, and the foundation is what we're talking about here. I have to have a shipbuilding industry and a munitions industry and a IW industry that can perform and deliver all the kit we need, train the sailor to operate it, get it out in the field and be able to use it and deter, and if necessary, conduct the fight and win. So really focus on the foundry on that. I can tell you that, I can list 100 reasons why we're not where we should be as far as the outcomes that I expect when I submit a budget. I'm not receiving those outcomes. There's a lot of reasons for those, but we have energy and commitment right now to change those outcomes, right? I am finally getting traction on, if I don't give consistent long-term headlights to industry with multi-years, solid contracts, right? Contracts that are based on schedule versus cost, right? I'm not going to change the game, right? We're going to perform like we've performed, because if you see too much risk in your industry, what are you going to do? You're going to hunker down. I would do the same thing, right? And just me telling you that at Sea Air Space doesn't make it so, right? You actually have to see it in reality, and it's reflected in budgets that actually get passed and move out. I want to move away from that for just a second and talk about a full year CR and give you a little insight that I'm telling Congress right now that they don't understand. The CR that we're currently under is from 24. Navy did very well. I had an $11 billion bump from 23 to 24. So by and large, as they move money around, I was pretty good. I was not good on manpower, on military personnel, to the point where I almost had an ADA this year. It's worse if I go into 26, right? I've added 12,000 sailors. I've added a cumulative total of 8.4% pay. And I've had a junior enlisted pay raise that will go for a full year, and it only went for a half year in 25. Pay raises and junior enlisted pay are based on the NDAA. It's authorizers. So when they approve the NDAA, I got to pay the pay raise on 1 January. So I already have 2 paydays that I can't afford, right? Now, if I expand that to a full year, I'm going to go to Congress and say, I need an exception to apportionment for how many billions of dollars to pay our people. So as you talk to people, why are CR bad? It's not just new starts. You can kind of write anomalies in to take care of that, but it's this basic hurting sailors that you don't want to do. I'll get back to what I was talking about. I'm telling everybody that because I was like, they all have to know it, and They don't understand. So we talked about shipbuilding, but the other thing about this is inside the foundry is working on our repair and maintenance capabilities, right? And really focusing on doing that in the smartest way possible. And maybe sometimes, what we're trying to do right now is for surface ship maintenance, Roy, we're reducing the periodicity of our dry dockings to 6 years, and we're going to do more smaller availabilities to try to sustain a higher level of readiness throughout and not go through the peak in the valley, the huge sinusoid that we've been going through in the past. Shockingly, it looks a lot like what we lived through in the 90s, right? And that's how we did business. Also, it's like, be smart. If you're going to extend an availability because I don't have a part for a major modernization I'm going to do, well, we can do that modernization in the next availability. Right? World-class planning. Move your planning back, lock your package, and then make changes by exception, but not by default, right? And really focused in on a lot of congressional interest on amphib maintenance, very focused on amphib maintenance, and like the key drivers for that, which is tank work, which is engines, boiler work. How do we do that better? Good plans to do that, and sometimes it's like aha moments. It's like, oh, we could have done that before, and I think it's going to go better in that way. A lot of things that I don't know whether they didn't talk about munitions today. You're going to hear huge rhetoric about munitions over the next few months. The Munitions Acceleration Council that Dep Sec War leads, he meets with the CEOs of the munitions companies, and he's got a deal team, and they're striking deals to go to multi-years, to be able to work through the challenges we have, to facilitize, to make more munitions. A lesson learned from the Red Sea and obviously from the Ukraine conflict, you use a lot of munitions when you go to war. You just do. And if you don't have all you need all the time, that's bad. So pretty soon you have rocks, and rocks are not that effective in the 21st century to throw it back at people. We're also looking very hard at low-cost munitions and trying to move faster. And I tell my industry partners, I go, the primes, I go, it's a yes and. I just need more of everything. So if Dep Sec War works it and we get additional funds for that and you can facilitize for it, let's just move out. And you're all going to benefit. It's all really a good thing. Something that I worked really hard for the transition team, I was put in charge of that earlier this year, was looking at where we're going in the future with force design, right? And working through force design in the future. And looking at Admiral Cottle's vision of kind of how he sees naval forces. And actually, it's really quite smart. And there's some writing about it. I think Brian Clark has some good writing about this, in a hedge strategy kind of approach. We're going to be based on general purpose forces for the rest of this century. Carriers, attack submarines, destroyers, frigates. We're going to be based on those. And that's what does your day-to-day work. That's your deterrence work around the globe that you do every day. If you look at Nimitz, who's finally going to retire after 50-plus years, how many years was she actually in war? Combat? 1, 2? What did she do the rest of the time? Stop other conflicts, right? Make sure that the rest of the world knew that we cared about that region of the earth, and that's why they were there. So if you're doing that, you need a strategy that you can never afford to buy enough general purpose forces for that one exquisite event, right? Even in World War II, it took an incredible all-of-nation approach to be able to get to those general purpose forces. And literally, because of the amount of time that we had, and we started a couple years early, the time we had in the war, those forces actually came to bear by the time you got into the latter part of 1944. You can't rely on that today, so you have to hedge it. So you need tailored offsets and tailored forces. Think robotic and autonomous systems, think AI, think resilient C2, low-cost munitions, all moving into that to be able to support it. He's really focused on that. I think it's going to have some legs. And it really, and just to tell the audience really well, I mean, we were talking hybrid forces, and I think it was being conflated that we're going to go like, you want to reduce your manned forces, and you're going to have replace them with uncrewed forces. Well, uncrewed forces don't really do sea control around the world. They don't really do presence, right? You're not really that scared about them, right? Until they start shooting missiles or something, right? They're just kind of there, right? But manned ships with commanding officers who will take action, right, and make decisions, that says that you actually have presence. So that's always important. So it's not an either or, it's a yes and we're going to move forward in that way. I think that the last thing I want to say on this, I want to open it up for questions. Let's see, how am I doing on time? Exactly right, which is great, is I just want to say that the acceleration of U.S. shipbuilding, it's not really a nice to have. It's a national imperative for us. Strong maritime nations throughout the history of the globe kind of have their way around the globe. I think we'd like to sustain that in the United States. Now I'm going to open up for questions. Thank you for listening.
Sure, I'll ask a question from online. Kevin Wensing asks, small shipbuilding companies are nimble but cannot build the largest ships our Navy needs. Can we encourage partnerships between traditional builders and new companies bringing more robotics to meet the critical challenge?
Yes, I definitely think you do. And actually, you heard that here, right? Where Hanwha was talking about moving into companies that are doing USVs and UUVs and trying to go, you have technology, I know how to scale. So I think that breaking down some of the barriers that we've had in the past and doing that is like, we're in a position now, and really the first time in 30 years probably, inside the Navy and our industrial base, is to say, there's room for everybody. Come in and let's go faster. And I've actually had discussions with primes about that. I said, don't look at them as a threat. They're not a threat to you. You're fine. That's going to continue to flow because I still need whatever exquisite system you provide, but I just need mass, right? And how do I generate that mass? And so, yes, 3 bags full. Hello, sir.
Hi, Pete Daly, former Naval Institute CEO. I've got a question for you. It's very clear people want to move out. You've praised the energy, the drive, the focus, but you've also gave a great example with manpower. So there's things that reside in the reconciliation bill, and then there's things that are in the annual defense budget.
Yes.
And manpower is a great example, training, lots of stuff that's not big ticket. And yet the budget came in this year kind of at a disappointing level, the annual budget. A lot of great progress with reconciliation. What can we do to give the demand signal that people can rely on to get budgets passed and have the annual TOA be sufficient?
So that's a really great question. And the reconciliation journey is exactly that. It's a journey on where we have gone this year and how it's playing out. And so everybody realizes the PB was submitted with a HASC markup version of reconciliation, and then they passed the SASC bill, right? And so there's disconnects inside of reconciliation that they're still working through on the Hill right now. And because of how they did it, there were lines that were like broken up into 2 pieces. It's quite frustrating. I normally see program decision memorandum that's like 150 pages. It was like 540 pages this year because they had to explain that. So it's challenging. I think that, if you look at it through that perspective, you're going to have uncertainty because there is uncertainty about it. The certainty, though, is there is a commitment to raise the defense budget and to actually move out in those things that you'll hear about. So it's a little bit of a say-do mismatch on what they're doing because you can't see it like you normally see it in an appropriations.
Do you see progress on the Hill in appreciating this? Do you see progress at OMB in appreciating this?
I see progress on the Hill.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jess Boyd. I work for a small business called The Outpost. We represent other small business clients and essentially make sure they get in front of the correct people that they need to. I'm curious if there are other avenues out there or in the future besides the SIBR and SITR programs for small businesses to be up for potential projects other than the primes that already currently serve contracts.
Thank you. That's a great question, and the answer to that is yes. So the Secretary of the Navy just established the Naval Rapid Capabilities Office, which I think most people are aware of DIU and what DIU has done. There's nothing kind of between DIU and OPNAV N9, right? That is requirements. And so we're putting an entity in the middle that can move fast, look across the landscape, not just primes, but everybody, to say, you know, what's a good idea, what's new. We'll have what's called a bets board. Admiral Kano and myself will chair that board to say we're going to pick winners and losers to try to go after it. Does this meet our need? Can we go after that and bring in the companies that can be able to do that? And I see that being a lot more small, medium-sized companies to be able to do that will go rapidly and iterate and be very agile. And then we'll call the ball on whether there's value there, I want to scale it, there's not value there, get rid of it. There's value for a period of time. I could buy some of them and then something else will pass it. I think that when you look at, just in robotics and autonomous systems, one of the things that I think we realized from Ukraine is the arc of technology change, right, is much faster than we could ever do in our normal acquisition process. So you have to look at those as consumables, right? And you're going to just go buy another one, right, of something else that does different, better things. And I try to get my folks out of the idea that, that we continuously want to buy something and sustain it forever, or we throw it away and buy something else, which also means that the entry cost of that particular end item can't be too high, right? But it meets the need and it moves forward. The other thing that I've been working on, and OpNav is going to change here shortly, CNO Cottle has some vision, but I've been working on for about 1.5 years now is changing our requirements process conceptually, not physically, but conceptually. So what I've been working on, and I had Admiral Pitts when he was in the job as N9, and we talked about this, and we wanted to spread objectives and threshold, which is the objective of a requirement and a threshold of a requirement. Spread those out if we can, right? And then incentivize contractually in the RFP or whatever to say, try to move closer to objective. But so often we would create a requirement that was so exquisite that only 5 companies on the planet could do it. And then when they would do it, it became exceptionally expensive. And also, we took all the innovation away that they could do. If you'd ask them, if you would spread those out, well, I could do this, but in the middle there, I could do something else that you really need that we hadn't thought about. So to try to leverage all the smart people in this space more than what we have in the past. So I hope that helps.
Yes, that does. Yeah, our founder is one of the creators of the AFWorks program, so it's really great to see that that's being expanded into other branches. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
It's a great model. Thank you. Other questions?
Hi, Mallory Shelbourne with US 9 News. You talked about the importance of sea power and this renewed sense of urgency across the government. The national security strategy that just came out never mentioned sea power or shipbuilding. What should we make of that?
I actually don't think you should dig too deep into that. The national security strategy is an all-of-government approach. It does list the maritime in there and the importance of the maritime, but when it does that, they tend not to, even in past NSSs, it never drilled down. I don't think I ever read carrier in any of the NSSs in the past, even though the president, any administration uses the carrier every day for national power. So I didn't take it as an affront to us or that it slows us down. I looked at it as a geographic perspective of how we're going to treat the planet, mostly within the DIME framework, but the M being a constant for those. That's how I interpreted it, but it's open to interpretation by everybody who reads it.
The mention of the US Navy focuses on the Western Hemisphere, so how should we take that to mean as far as a sense of urgency when it comes to China and their actions in the Indo-Pacific?
I think that, and I'm getting out of my range because this is very much strategic policy. I should probably ask Admiral Fogo to talk about this. He'd probably do a better job. But I really think that when they talked about that, it was like if I look at a cumulative strategy for the globe, what do I want to accomplish in each of these regions? We have been the hegemon in the Western Hemisphere since the Monroe Doctrine. At least we said we were, right? And it's just reaffirming that position as that hegemon and saying that intrusions inside this hemisphere, whether that's by terrorists, narco-terrorists, other countries, we're actually going to take offense to that and do something about it. That's how I interpret it. Thank you.
Another question from our online audience. In Admiral Cottle's third C note, he mentions a hedge strategy, acknowledging that the Navy cannot build an ideal fleet under today's industrial limits. From N8's vantage point, how does that influence investment trade-offs among readiness, modernization, and infrastructure expansion over the next decade?
It does a lot for trade-offs. So if you look, I do a battle force size assessment called the BIFSAR, and it comes with every covered event. And a covered event is a new NDS. So now that the NSS is signed, I expect the NDS, which has been in draft for months, to be signed. The good news is I'm already working on the update, right? And I know that it'll be high 300s of ships like it was before, right? That's a requirement. We'll include this year MUSVs because I can, right? Because it's a thing now, and I can include those for combat power. Eventually, I want to look at force packages instead of just ship numbers because it drives you into a bad discussion, right? Of capabilities on the platforms or what are important. You know, I could call it, it's a barge, it does a whole bunch of things, it goes fast, you know, but I call it a destroyer instead, right? So how do you do that? And then how much can you allocate, right, to do these tailored offsets, these tailored forces, the hedge forces, right, to do that, acknowledging that you have to have both in numbers. It probably means that you won't be able to afford the upper limit of what that requirement is, nor, as we've talked about today, that's a capacity issue right now, right? I actually tell industry, I said, you know, if you build on a shorter center on the platforms, if you, on an LHA as an example, from a 4 to a 3-year center, matching what I did in the 1990s as those ships retire, I will buy it, right? Because it saves me money from extending platforms that are very not very cost effective, low ROI. So if I acknowledge that I'm not getting there in the near term, how do I hedge? And how do I play force structure that's agile, that's cheaper, that's expendable? One thing that's really fun, and I'll use Admiral Paparo because I just love this. He looks at naval power from a cost perspective is kind of like a dumbbell, right? On one side, you have exquisite, expensive stuff that's survivable. On the right side, you have maybe a tritable, expendable, less expensive, you know, robotic and autonomous systems, small USVs, UAVs, et cetera. And you also have low-cost munitions that are over here. In the middle is kind of a bad place to be. The bar is a bad place to be, where you can be very expensive, not very capable, perhaps, and not very survivable. So you want to stay out of that middle area, right? And you can think for us, submarines, carriers, destroyers are over on the right, and what I want to put on the other, that's my left, your right. On the other one is I want to put low-cost munitions, I want to put RAS in there, MUSVs I want to put in there, small USVs I want to put in there, and that's how I'm trying to approach it in my mind, is like, where's my cost curve? If I build a logistics ship, that's a smaller logistics ship that's just going to get shot in the second island chain, and it's 2/3 the price of my large logistics ships, it's probably not a very good investment, right, as an example.
How about the role of mine warfare, offensive mine warfare for particularly sea denial?
Mine warfare is always relevant when you're doing sea denial, and it's challenging depending on where you are, right? If you're talking about, there's various locations on the planet that if you go mine them today, that might not be a good thing, but it would be very helpful to have them mined if the timer's right. So we are looking at additional mining capabilities and additional mining, weapons, right? I would like to go farther in that area than what we've gone in the past, but there are still some, reality challenges with mining.
Another question from an online audience member. What capabilities areas, if underfunded, would pose the highest operational risk within a hedge framework?
CC5IRS&T.
C5ISR&T.
Yes.
Okay.
Number
Explain
one.
that, sir.
The number one thing is that as you get into a more and more connected world, a more and more sensed world, you need to be able to get in to do what you need to do and then leave again, right? So having counter C5ISR&T is probably right now my number one priority to go after. In other words, it doesn't matter if I have the world's greatest warship, right, if I can't get to the fight, right? Once I get to the fight, I leverage that world's greatest warship.
And last question we've got is, Admiral, you've spent a lot of your time in your career focused on Europe and NATO, and much attention is now focused on the shipbuilding issue towards the potential of an Indo-Pacific conflict. How do you see the challenges associated with shipbuilding impacting U.S. strategy in Europe?
I actually don't see a big impact to Europe. I think that what you just saw from the icebreakers is we're pretty ecumenical about that. Allies and partners that bring skills and talent and want to play in the fishbowl with us, I think we're going to be open to that. So I don't think it's a negative in any way from a shipbuilding perspective. I think there's things to learn from our European shipbuilders. The LSM design that we just selected is a Damen design. It's a European design, so it's not like we're not going to shut them out. We're going to go best of breed, and we're going to do what Americans do. We're going to go out and get the best things and build them.
All right.
Thank you.
That's it, sir. Hooray.
Thanks.
Don't leave.
Don't leave. Okay.
Admiral, I want to thank you. Admiral needs to go. As you heard, he's got a meeting with SecNav. So we want to get him out of here in time. But I do want to thank you again for jumping at this opportunity, because it was literally days ago when I said, hey, would you mind doing this? And he said,
I asked him, was that January? Because no. I go, oh.
Yeah.
I did get approved. You have to get approved to come and speak now.
Yes, you do.
So I got approved like last night.
I'm glad you got approved. Anyway, thank you so much for a small token of our appreciation. We have a book for you. I don't have it with me, but it's Naval Power in Action.
Thanks.
Adler. And it's under $20. So you
Awesome.
can accept it.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Okay, so that concludes Defense Forum Washington 2025. I just want to thank a few folks. First of all, first and foremost, our speakers. Tremendous speakers today. I hope you got out of it what you were looking forward to. I especially want to thank our sponsors, Mr. Steve Waters, who's a trustee on our Board of Trustees at the Naval Institute, and Lockheed Martin, Radian Forge for supporting the Institute and making this program possible. I want to thank the Naval Institute staff for a tremendous job putting this together, but probably it looks easy. It is not easy. And it's really not easy during a period of a government shutdown and everything else that's going on. So there's lots of changes. There's lots of last-minute changes. There's lots of audibles that are necessary. You saw one of them today when we had one of the speakers was not on time. But anyway, the staff has done a great job, so my hat's off to them. So thank you for that. We look forward to seeing you at future other Naval Institute events. And for this one, we did something different. We have a chance now to continue the conversation with a cocktail in your hand, and it's going to be right next door through those doors. And of course, I cannot, being the week that it is, I cannot end this session without saying beat Army. Thank you.
Unlimited strength starts by pushing limits. Raising the bar, rising to every challenge. At Lockheed Martin, there's no boundary to our ambitions. No barrier we won't break through. Because our strength comes from innovation. And we make sure your strength has no limits.